Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. It's great to have you here. Thanks for joining what the CVE program is calling a CVE in an era of AI-enabled vulnerability discovery. We can go to the next slide. So on paper, we had more than 670 people across 68 countries register for this event from across the global vulnerability management ecosystem across a variety of communities and roles. Speaking of which, on the next slide, you can see that from the perspective of those roles, we've got everybody recognized from individual researchers, software maintainers, suppliers, enterprise, obviously CNAs, government organizations, security vendors, and everything in between. All people that rely on CVE information to make operational decisions. That breadth of participation really matters because the effects of AI-enabled vulnerability discovery are really not confined to just one part of the ecosystem. We can go to the next slide. These different communities are seeing different pressures and pain points, opportunities and consequences, and today gives us a really great opportunity to bring those perspectives together, and we're really thrilled that you're all here. So our program today on the screen includes a variety of things. We've got interactive community listening sessions, we've got lightning talks, we've got panel discussions, and each format is intended to contribute something different, hearing differently from a variety of broad community perspectives, examining specific ideas and experiences, and comparing perspectives from across the ecosystem. Before we get going, though, just want to dive into a couple logistical notes. So next slide, please. Given the size of today's audience, participant microphones are muted. You might have already noticed. We won't be able to really accommodate effectively open verbal participation at scale. So most of the engagement is going to take place through a tool called Mentimeter, which you'll all learn how to use. It's really great. It's an interactive tool that we'll be using during the community listening session that'll come right after this. And we have the Teams chat, of course, and we have, ideally, if it's working, because I've heard different things from different people, there's a Q&A function in Teams. So you're encouraged to post like general questions, comments, and examples in the chat. You know, I want to have, and I think the program's really desiring to have that sort of cross-participant engagement. We will do our best to review that chat throughout the event and make comment and elevate selected themes or questions where the time and format allow. We may not be able to address every contribution live in the event, but the chat and the Q&A will also be able to be reviewed after the event and reach out to folks after. Specifically on the Q&A, this is intended for more directed questions at the speakers and the presenters, whereas the normal chat's for widespread engagement across the participants. That's what we're trying to do. Really appreciate your understanding at the practical limitations of all this that come with an event of this size. We do encourage you to use the available tools as actively and constructively as possible. On that note, of course, please engage respectfully, make space and respect of a range of perspectives. Presenters will receive reminders as the time runs down, and topics that might need more time may be identified for follow-up, right? We're not gonna be able to get to everything today. Please do note that this is being recorded. We do plan to post these sessions just like we do with all CVE program gatherings, CNA technical summits, all these kinds of things, to post to the YouTube channel when they're ready. It's also really helpful to help us accurately capture the discussion and then develop the post-event summary of key themes and things that we're going to share after the fact. Importantly, if you have a experience or if you have a technical issue, there's an email on the screen there, CVE-AI-forum-support at CVE- I won't say all the hyphens, forgive me. You'll see it there. We'll put it in the chat too. But with all those things covered, let's dive in and crack on with why we're here and having this event. So we can go to the next slide. When the CVE program announced this event back in June, it published a discussion blog with it that brought together several themes that were already being raised in the working groups and by partner organizations across the program. The idea with this event was to provide more of an opportunity for broader community conversation across a huge group. It's challenging to have these big groups, but it's really helpful sometimes to all be in the same place at the same time. If you haven't seen that blog, we can drop that in the chat too, but it can also be found on cve.org. You could probably seen it through all the links and signing up and being here. At the center of all this, though, was the recognition that the AI-enabled discovery going on is really affecting the speed, scale, and variability of information that's moving throughout the entire vulnerability lifecycle across the ecosystem. It's changing how findings are generated. It's changing how findings are reported. It's affecting the burden placed on maintainers, suppliers, coordinators, CNAs to validate and respond. It's also altering the timing of things like fixes and remediations and advisories and CVE records and all these things. It's also affecting the decisions organizations ultimately make about what to patch and mitigate, monitor, and investigate. Some of these things are already quite visible. Others are still emerging. They'll not necessarily appear in the same way for every organization or community, and this is why discussion needs to happen now. We have this great opportunity to compare experiences, identify pressure points, shape constructive responses, rather than waiting for individual things to become systemic ones, ideally. So we can go to the next slide. No one participant will see this entire process from beginning to end. A researcher may see dramatic increase in the number of plausible findings that can be generated or explored. Maintainers may experience this as a growing validation and triage burden. Suppliers may be trying to coordinate, remediation across complex product environments. CNAs of all kinds might be working through questions of scope and evidence and duplication and assignment, transfer. And farther downstream, a vendor may be trying to correlate incomplete information across multiple sources. And a consumer is asking a much more immediate question: does this affect us? What should we do about it? These are all related questions, but they're not identical. And they also do not really belong universally in the CVE program alone. The CVE program as a whole provides an essential shared infrastructure for identifying and communicating about publicly disclosed vulnerabilities, but many of the issues we'll discuss extend beyond the program scope to software engineering, product security, open source support, security tooling, intelligence, organizational risk decision-making. So the value of today's event really comes from putting those different perspectives into conversation. Next slide, please, Joe. So this event is both a listening forum and a working forum. We're here to listen carefully to what different parts of the community are experiencing, and there's really no predetermined policy announcement waiting at the end of the day. We're not here to force immediate agreement on issues that may require much deeper examination further, but we're definitely not here to spend hours simply admiring the problem. I know that many are already in many instances dealing with that on a daily basis. So as we hear about these challenges, we also want to hear about responses. So for everybody that's here, what is already working? What are organizations experimenting with? What can AI help or help with triage and correlation or validation interpretation, not just create additional workload? Which assumptions or processes deserve closer examination, and what questions are ready to move into more focused work? Ideally, people will hear, all of us will leave today with ideas they can bring back to their own organizations. New conversations and relationships can continue after this event, and a clear sense of where follow-up is needed. Some of that work, of course, as I mentioned, belongs within CVE program. So there's a variety of working groups where some of the stuff we talk about today may end up being more actioned in there. Some may require broader collaboration across vulnerability management ecosystem, and some may depend on changes in areas not directly within CVE. So, as I mentioned, software engineering, supplier practices, tooling, and decision making. Okay, we can go to the next slide. I'd really like to thank all of you for being here and start to think about, as we're here today, some of these high-level questions. What changes when vulnerability information is created and moves through the ecosystem at greater speed and scale? Second, where are the existing workflows, responsibilities, or assumptions coming under pressure? Third, where can we process data, where can process data or technology improvements make the biggest difference for you? These questions can be applied across the lifecycle, from discovery, the graphic that we showed, vulnerability lifecycle discovery and reporting, validation, remediation, publication for CVE information, enrichment, and downstream decision making. They also leave room for an important point, as I mentioned before. AI is not necessarily and uniquely should not be the only source of pressure. It can also be potentially part of the response. Next slide. Okay. So without further ado, I've been blabbering on for a lot of time. Again, if there's more questions about what we are all here for, and you didn't get a chance to read that blog and all the other conversations that really distilled a lot of those things down, it is on cve.org. Check it out. But we're going to begin today with the broadest possible view by hearing directly from you all. So in this listening session, we're really interested in who you are, what you're already seeing, what you are anticipating, what you believe deserves attention and priority during the rest of today's discussions. And as you participate, and this goes to all presenters and non-presenters, I encourage you all to think not necessarily about what's just becoming harder, but where things are working, even a little bit. What are you trying? Where focused follow-up or change could really make a meaningful difference. And with that, I'm really happy to introduce and hand it over to Jay and Bob, who will be leading this portion of the discussion. Over to you guys.
Marvelous. Thank you, Alec. Hello, Jay. Are you still out there? Get a thumbs up.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Marvelous. Hey, everybody. This is Bob Lord and Jay Jacobs. We are the co-chairs for the Consumer Working Group, and we are very excited to hear about this particular event and wanted to figure out how we could participate. And so, given that Jay is a proper data scientist, we decided to put him to work and to try to gather input from all of the participants. Let me just read something from the blog post here. It says, the central question is how the CVE program can continue to serve as a trusted and scalable foundation for vulnerability identification, while the broader ecosystem adapts to greater speed, volume, uncertainty, and AI-assisted consumption. The purpose of this event is to bring the community together to open a discussion about these very important issues and to gain practical input from the people doing everyday work. Wow. Okay, so how are we going to get several hundred of our closest friends in a limited amount of time to give us all of their thoughts and opinions? Jay, do you want to talk a little bit about how we're going to be doing that with Mentimeter?
Yeah, so if folks can either scan this QR code, I would probably hope people could do it on their desktop because we're going to have some free text and you're going to be typing, hopefully a lot. So you can go to www.menti.com, enter the code at the top, 7718-0300, and that should get you in. And the first screen is going to ask for a name. It's just an identifier, or if you really want feedback, like if you want us to follow up, if we have questions, you could put your email address in there or something. It's not going to be shown publicly. It's only going to be in the data. But if you want to put a pseudonym or something in there, please feel free to do that too. There's no need to be totally honest, but it's just going to be used to identify the questions. And we've got 10 questions we're going to talk through. It'll be live. We're going to see some data come in as we're doing this.
That's right. So we have a series of different kinds of questions. Jay mentioned that working on your desktop is probably preferable if you have a lot to type. So if you want to go to menti.com and then type in the code, that's probably the preferable way. But if you want to scan the QR code, you can do that as well. So we'll be using this information in a couple of ways. One is that Jay and a team of scientists and some mainframe computers in his basement are going to do some number crunching after we get all of the data. And then there's another session on today at 1:15 Eastern, which will allow us to provide some initial feedback on the number crunching. And so hopefully we'll have something interesting. But we may also reserve the right to have Jay go off for another few days and take a look at the data from another perspective or two, and then provide some sort of out briefing based on that. So how many people do we have, Jay, out of the 250 people who are here?
159, it looks like.
Okay. Should we give folks another moment to go to menti.com and type out that code, or you want to jump in?
I think we should jump in. Just
do
get going. So this on my screen is actually very small, but if you could, just where in the world are you? This is just a warm up. This is getting people, used to clicking. And we can see what's going on here and stuff like that. So just on the map, you can click. It's very small on my screen. I will advance this so we can see this showing up here. So this is as folks are coming in. We've got about half people have submitted already. Good representation around the world. This is pretty fun, Bob.
I like this. And if people are and if people are joining late, you can look at the top there. It says join menti.com and use that code.
Yeah. And
This is phenomenal.
Yeah, if you haven't joined yet, you're missing out on the fun of clicking on a little map so far. Just saying.
I'm really impressed at how global this is already. We still have work to do, but
yeah,
pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. No one in Australia. I guess it is like 1 a.m. Japan is impressive for the folks joining from Japan because it's got to be middle of the evening there. In India too, pretty bad timing.
Yeah, I really appreciate everybody being here.
We hope to make it worth your time for missing the sleep. All right, we've got 135.
It's pretty good.
I think we'll move on to the next one. This is just a warm up, right? This is probably not going to have too much in the data analysis for that. All right, let's go on to this. What parts of the system do you work in firsthand? So you can answer up to 3. These are multiple select, and just pick the 3 that are mostly where you work. And that is, let's see. So yeah, you can pick up to 3 and just pick them, and then we'll click on here and we'll see them go live.
Yeah, and
as
so
we're doing this.
Yeah, so the ones on the left here is, discovering and reporting vulnerabilities. I think the first 4 or so are people upstream who are finding the vulnerabilities, reporting them, fixing them, assigning CVEs. And then the next couple are related to the operators of software. So determining an organization's exposure or coordinating the patches and mitigations, tracking, responding to active exploitations, things like that. And then, of course, there's an additional one for people who are building the tools, research, developing policy. So if there are policy people on board here today, you can click on that one, and then other.
Yep. Over half.
So this will really help us. Yeah, this will really help us understand the answers that you're giving later, because we want to make sure that we're seeing all parts of the ecosystem. I'm surprised at how even this is, to be honest. This is really fascinating.
Yeah.
You're the data scientist. You tell me.
It's really fascinating, Bob.
Thank you.
It is. It's a nice even spread. We're seeing pretty good spread of tasks here. I think the next slide will be interesting, because on the next one we're going to ask you to pick one of these to really, like, what role are you going to answer the rest of the questions in, and so you don't have to think about it too hard yet. We're 140 out of 200 or so. If folks don't want to answer 2, that's okay. We'll be moving on a little bit here. And as Bob and I were prepping this, we made a joke about watching microwave popcorn, that as we start to see, like, you sort of watch it till the popping starts to slow down. Like it looks like the popping on this one is slowed down, that we could probably pull the popcorn out and move on here. Okay. All right, let's do forward. So this is the primary position. You can pick one on this one. And so this is really like, what are you doing in the society, and what are you going to answer the rest of the questions as, right? This is really the pivot point.
And it's not too late to join. You can join at menti.com and use the code up at the top and play along at home.
And let's talk about the free gift they get for joining, the tote bag. You're going to get a branded tote bag. I believe Alec is arranging that. If you don't get one, feel free to reach out to Alec.
No, that is not true. That is not true. Alec is going to melt down.
Yeah.
Or maybe he'll make some tote bags. I don't know.
All right, let's see how this is coming along. Some good CNA representation. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And then second being the consumer side, manage vulnerability exposure remediation for an organization. That's a good spread.
Jay, have we given them a plug for the consumer working group yet?
I think you've got a platform to do that now, Bob. I think it's a great time while we're waiting for the popcorn here.
Yeah, so Jay and I co-host the consumer working group. So a lot of the CVE ecosystem has been historically designed around the upstream producers of the CVE records, which makes a lot of sense. And what we wanted to do is to bring the perspective of the downstream users. So that could be the organizations or commercial companies that ingest all the CVE records for analysis purposes or to provide a service, a vuln management service of some sort. But it also includes the operators who are trying to figure out, either with those extra tools or with spreadsheets or maybe just Ouija boards, what are they going to try to patch today, given all the constraints? And the reality is that you can't patch all the things. So we want to hear much more from the consumers. And so if you go to the cve.org website and mosey on over to the working group section, you'll find a way to join that. So that's open to the public.
And I do feel that we need more representation too. There are a lot of working groups actually. Like we see in this one, there's 8% at the top there of discover report vulnerabilities. We've got the researcher working group, and then there's also the automation working group, quality working group, and I'm sure there's others that I'm not touching on. But there's a lot of working groups to get involved.
Well, absolutely. All right.
All right, let's move on to the next question. You want to introduce this one, Bob?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is understand a little bit about the kinds of things that we've been seeing in the press and in the social media, but we really want to hear from you. We really want to hear what is the ground truth from the people who are in the field across all of those different fields that we just talked about. So, the volume of vuln-related work has significantly increased for me in the last 6 months. I think I might know where people are going to go on that one, but I'm not going to prejudge. We actually want to get the data from you. I spend more time separating actionable findings from noise. It has become harder to determine which vulnerabilities deserve attention first.
Bob?
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to jump in and just say, like, if we want people with direct knowledge and experience. So, like, even if you're hearing that the volume is increasing, but you're not seeing it, answer what you're seeing, not what you think is going on.
Yeah, we're trying to use this to separate what we see on social media from what you are seeing in the field. And so, oh my God, somebody's made a tote bag here for Alec. Let me just go through a couple of the other ones. I can respond to important vulnerabilities within the available time at a sustainable pace. Automation has reduced the amount of manual work I need to perform. So we're really trying to understand the landscape of what's really happening, whether you are upstream producing software, CNA, researcher, or if you're downstream, if you're an operator. We want to understand how you are, from a firsthand perspective, seeing the world change. We still see some popcorns popping in, so please take a moment and fill out those cards and letters.
Yeah. And so I'm right at the top there. We can see that the volume, a lot of people are reporting on the volume increasing. Yeah. I'm kind of excited to see, it looks like that automation one is slightly above average. Clearly the fourth line here about sustainable is a disagreement, dropping below the middle. Yeah. I think we're about there. So we're going to move on. The next question is it's this one, right? So this, I'll try to introduce this one, Bob. This is going to put these points onto the screen. And so basically, how would you characterize the AI related changes? And this is basically from a workload, time pressure, clearly a lot of people have seen that increase of things going on, from AI related, and also how we're seeing the process transformation. In other words, so we might see an increase in volume, but are we seeing the process itself being transformed by AI? In other words, it's helping, it's contributing to, it's not really changing how things are getting done, perhaps if it's on the low side, but if it is transforming exactly how things are getting done, we want to rate that one higher. And so these are two separate sliders in the intake form. As you go through them, put them both where you think they are. And so you can see that grid there. the 4 quadrants, basically, if you're putting a high, low, 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 high, high, whatever, that's going to show up here. And this is a little bit longer one, so I'm going to wait a little bit to show some of the answers. We only have a very small handful.
Give people
submitted.
a few moments to think about it.
Yeah.
We're actually doing okay on time, so we can give people a moment.
Good. Yeah.
Just to pop in a clarifying question, if you're not affected by some of these things, you don't answer, right? You only
Correct.
answer the ones that you're affected by directly.
Yes, good call out, Lisa. That's great. Yeah, so there's a skip button that you can skip some of these if you don't have direct exposure to them. Yeah, it's a great call out. And yeah, Bob, do you have other things to add to this or to talk about while we're waiting? We've got
No, I
several things
think
that
again, just to echo what Lisa said, there's a lot of conversation in the social networks, and we're trying to figure out what's actually closer to the ground truth for folks in the community.
Yeah, and as some data in my background, I'm seeing regression to the mean here, but we're seeing the points sort of cluster pretty mid, which is interesting. And I think one of the things I think you mentioned, Bob, we're going to try and do some analysis of the data on the back end. I think what'll be interesting is, like, this is showing the average across everything. I think what's going to be interesting is looking at the individual distributions of how people answer this. I think that'll be much more interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, we still haven't gotten 50% yet, so let's give people another moment.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, while we're waiting, what do you get when you cross the Atlantic Ocean with the Titanic?
I don't know what.
About halfway.
Okay. Folks, please, I'm begging you, fill out this form. He has printed out a whole bunch of dad jokes. And if you need to hit skip, that's totally fine, whatever the honest truth is, but please spare us all.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Good. Yeah, I got a whole list here.
Please, folks, please fill out the form. The dad jokes will continue until the forms are completed.
Pretty deep thoughts on that one, Jay.
Yeah. Oh, I got a whole list of them. Nothing but deep thoughts today. All right. How are we doing on the popcorn, Bob?
We still less than half.
Okay. I mean, this is a more complex question. There's a lot of things going on here. So, and I'm trying to also answer the questions. And so, like, I'm one of the unpopped popcorn kernels there. So, yeah. Okay. I think we could probably move on, huh?
Yeah, I think that's about it.
All right. Okay. This is one of 2 areas where you can go to town. This is where you can put anything in here. You have 200 characters, but you can submit multiple. So if you start a sentence, I think you can continue on in the next one. And this is basically what we want you to do, is to talk about your AI related changes in a positive or negative light, what changed, what work it's caused or removed or whatever. This is where, sometimes in the CVE program, as I don't want to speak for everybody, but you can sort of get into your own little bubble sometimes. And part of this working group, this session today, is to really make sure that we're hearing all the voices. And so if you are experiencing something firsthand, throw that in here and And you could do anything in here. Of course, it's free text, but we're going to try and make sense of all this text and go through each and every one of them.
Yeah. And again, in the spirit of trying to cut through the noise, sometimes the social media algorithms are predisposed to highlight the things that are not going well, and that can sometimes obscure the people who have made some progress using these tools to help them with their workload, or to refactor their workload, or to change their entire processes. So I would love to hear the entire spectrum of good and bad and whatever else.
Yeah. And if you want to throw more in there, like if you've submitted something and you're like, what, I don't know what, like I really like this one, the flooded as with useless CVEs from so-called researcher CNAs. If you want to
Love to hear
expand more on
details.
that.
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
submit again with a little bit more color, but
Yeah.
keep it friendly, keep it
As an AppSec vendor, crazy increase on the workload. Yeah.
it's an AppSec vendor. Interesting.
What's SNR? Does anybody know?
Signal
Lower
to noise
SNR.
ratio.
Ah, thank you. Yeah. My skill of TLRs, TLAs, 3-letter acronyms, lacking.
Orders of magnitude increase in vulnerability discovery during internal testing, which is cascading into challenges in patching and disclosure. So this sounds like a
P-cert
software
perspective, yeah.
organization who's trying to figure out how to create the patches and then disclose and then ship the updates to the customers.
Added AI risk. We haven't even talked about the attack surface of AI, but like for mostly we're somewhat focused on the impact of CVE records and our ecosystem here. We can scroll down. There's going to be a lot of these. We've got 70 plus here submitted.
Yeah. And you can submit
CVE
multiple
issues,
ones, so you could have, you can separate your comments into different chunks. AI burnout is probably a real thing. It seems like it sometimes. Yeah, I think getting qualitative as well as quantitative comments is very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think especially burnout around the time Mythos was announced and the hype, and I think I know from the consumer side there were a lot of pressure to say, are we ready for this Mythos world, and a lot of pressure.
Yeah, that's a good point. So as you're making these comments, it's helpful to know where you are in the ecosystem. So the word patching, for example, could refer to the software manufacturer fixing the defect in their code. It could also apply to the operator trying to apply that software update. Two very different perspectives. So the more context you can provide as to which one you're thinking about, that would be helpful, especially for large organizations where you are making software as well as deploying that same software.
I appreciate spelling mistakes now. See, it's a free text. Like you could put almost anything in here.
Good. And then Alec mentioned in the chat, as a reminder, we're going to crunch all this data during the middle portion of the day, and we're going to discuss the findings more towards the end of the day and find paths for work to pick up and assign to working groups and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
What other ones catch your eye? We have almost 50% participation.
Yeah, and I'm one of the ones not participating anymore because I'm focusing more on the slides. So I'm one of the counts that went down. But hopefully people are still following along. There's going to be a lot of good stuff to go through.
Pick another one that you like. More AI burnout, okay?
AI burnout, yeah. We're seeing no meaningful change show up a lot. I wonder if it's just sitting there. No meaningful
that's
change.
interesting. That's interesting. I'd love to know.
Words.
Yeah, if you're not...
Lisa, I think this one's for you or from you. I don't know.
Yeah, which one was that? Is that you?
That wasn't me. No, somebody else has experienced the joy. Patch Tuesday.
Sharing the joy with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but no meaningful change. It would be great to hear more.
This is
about that.
This is good. A positive being CVE description preparation is much faster.
Oh, using
So
AI?
that's good. Like if if you're creating CVE, I think this is one of the areas that hopefully we see AI really contributing is as you're working on creating a record, there's going to be obviously some AI support for writing better descriptions, being more thorough, pulling stuff out of, the email exchanges with the researcher, that sort of thing. So there could be some interesting things there.
Hmm.
Better quality vuln reports, language and POC. That's
Oh.
interesting because you also hear AI slop on the other side. So this is an interesting comment to hear it from the other side. Right below it, some hallucinations and some reports. I mean, like the good and the bad right there next to each other. All right. This is good. A lot of bugs that aren't vulns. Timely remediation, blast radius, yeah. The flood. All right.
CVE data is hard to understand and act upon. Okay.
Was that, I'm curious if that was a new thing for people?
Yeah, that was status quo. I don't know.
Sorry. We are not here to inject ourselves, Bob. We are collecting everybody's thoughts.
Just trying to understand what they're saying.
All right. I think we can move on. Yeah. Immature AI libraries. Yeah.
Popcorns have stopped popping.
All right. Let's move on here. Yeah, that's great. This is a level set, and Bob and I threw this one in here sort of last minute, but how familiar are you with these CVE program elements? Because we're gonna get into these a little bit, and if you're not familiar at all, we'd like to know that. If you're very familiar, we want to know that, like, how familiar are you with these different programs? I don't know, Bob, do you want to run through the different programs?
I'll just go through these. So the first one, CVE program operations. So that includes the CVE program rules, which are published on the website, policies, the boards, and the working groups. The next one is about the federated assignment. So that's the move to
CNA.
the larger number of CNAs. Yep. CVE record format. So that's the actual JSON schema itself, managed out of the quality working group. The CVE services. So that's the API, the system that ingests all of the records, the reservation system, validation logic, things like that. And then the last one is the public CVE list and the data. So it's downloading the data en masse, or well, Lisa has a fun little drowning picture in the chat. Thank you for that. So so we want to know where you are most familiar, and where we might also have some gaps that could be addressed.
Yep, and we're more than halfway through this, so we have we're on the home stretch, and we really appreciate people sticking with it here. Yeah. And while people are going through this, last weekend, Bob, I was watching Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and I realized while watching it that 6 out of the 7 dwarfs aren't happy.
Folks, please fill out the forms. Please fill out the forms. Please, I'm begging you.
Yeah. Okay, let's see how the responses are coming in here. Yeah, towards the middle.
All right.
A lot of people more on the bottom one, which is great that they're accessing the data. That's great, Steve.
It's a dopey joke.
Nice.
Thank you, Steve.
It's really audience participation that makes these things worth the time.
It's community coming together to stop Jay's dad jokes.
I think we can move on to the next one, because this is a slightly generic question, and sort of intentionally vague, but where do you feel the most work needs to be done? This one's a rank. And so I believe in the app, you can, you drag it up or down, slide things around, and you're going to put them in an order 1 to 5 or 1 to 3 if you don't want to score some things. But just like if you're ranking these things, where do you think the most work needs to be done? We just want to rank them, just say top to bottom, that sort of thing.
And when you say work, you mean that the
From the
program
CVE
needs
program.
yeah, that we need to work together to change how things are working.
Yeah.
And this is based on your perspective and hopefully not just whatever you've read on social media.
Oh boy. Might have started something looking at the chat. Gabe Davis coming in with a good one. Photos.
Gabe, thank you.
Let's see how these are going. CNAs, the rules and policies coming up, battling for first, and accessing the data is bottom. This is really interesting because I spend, both Bob and I spend most of our time in the bottom two right now, the record format and downloading the data. And yeah. Bob, I was talking to a German friend of mine, and I asked if they knew the square root of 81, and they said no.
Please, everyone. I'm begging you to fill out the forms.
We're at 90, 93, a little coming up on halfway. We got some time here. No square root.
All right, people like that one. To the square root of 3. Todd, what's the answer?
Most work needs to be done for Oliver. The question is basically like, in your opinion, where could we see the most benefit of putting resources from the perspective that you're operating in? Where would you like to see the most improvement? And it's a little bit ambiguous and sort of intentional. It's sort of just this is sort of a wet finger in the wind kind of measurement. We're trying to, figure out which way the wind is blowing, that kind of thing. And once we get into the data, we can actually look at this in a couple of different ways, but I think this will be interesting too.
And Charles is saying he's curious to know what specific programs or operations or federated assignment work people feel needs to be done. I'm guessing CVE services would be the top. That's certainly the case, and people will have an opportunity to provide some additional commentary via texts in a few slides.
Yeah, we've got another free text one coming up here. Yeah. All right. How are we doing? Most people had a chance to answer that one.
We're over halfway. Yeah.
Yeah.
108, 109.
SWID. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Cassie says, my vote is enrichment. Does that fall under CVE services?
The enrichment is actually not a core part of the CVE program. A lot of the enrichment is external services, NVD, enrichment, others. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but then.
Well, I'd say that the CNAs are being asked to enrich their own records quite a bit. So
yes, that's a good point. Yes, and Alec chimed in with that as well. So, yeah. Validation is accountability, yeah. All right, I think we could move on. If you still need it a few times, I think you can still do it in the app. Let's see. So this is, again, a slider thing. But when we look at these programs, we want to rate them on the scale from, hey, this part of the program, from my perspective, when I work with this on a daily basis or when I interact with it, I think it's working as is. I think it's pretty good. Up to, hey, this particular thing needs a fundamental redesign. And so this, for each of these, it's the same programs, the same 5 elements, but go through each one and give your opinion. So before we were just sort of ranking, like this is more important than that one, this kind of thing. But now we can actually see, like if you said the CNA program needs the most effort, you could, fundamental redesign versus sliding down into working as is. You could really distance that from the other ones in your response. But this is your chance to say, maybe all of them need a fundamental redesign, or all of them are mostly working as is, and that'll sort of shade the previous one where you're ranking it. But we really want to focus on where you see how much effort, how much things that we need to go in there, especially accounting for the AI-enabled world that we are sliding into here. Anything to add on that, Bob?
No, I think you said it well.
Okay.
I'll just give people a moment to read all the text.
Yeah. So stop talking. Is that what you said?
Give 30 seconds before the next dad jokes. All right, just give me.
Oh,
30
okay.
seconds.
Are you just doing that so you get time to recover? You want like some time to prep, get yourself ready. Yeah. So this, just each one of these gets its own ranking, sliding that little slider. In the bite stick, yeah. For the pain that's about to come. Yeah. So one thing I don't understand, Bob, is that when somebody donates a kidney, they're called a hero, right? But if you donate 5 kidneys, suddenly the police are involved. Yeah.
74 people have filled it out. I'm begging you.
Didn't really hit the mark, Jay.
See, Lisa's enjoying it. This is good. Incredible interrogator. Like, I'll tell you anything. Stop. Yeah. Yeah.
Popcorns are still popping.
One more.
We have 10 minutes left, so.
Yeah. See? Yotam likes it.
Thank you, Vicky. Thank you for staying with us. We're near the end.
Yeah, and there's 5 here to rate. And so hopefully people get more time to answer here. Yeah. That's a good one. I'm gonna read that one out loud. I had a dream last night that I was cutting carrots with the Grim Reaper. I was dicing with death. That's pretty good.
All right. Next one's a free text form, so we might consider moving soon.
All right. Yeah, I think we could probably move on. Oh, we should see the results of this. See, I should have advanced this already.
Oh, yeah, you can do that. Yeah.
And this is, again, like we're seeing, you can sort of see the distributions in the background. And that's kind of interesting. We're seeing pretty even spread on the first one, really even spread on the next one. And then record format, mid to low CVE services. Yeah, interesting. It looks like there's going to be some good variety. Like if you're just looking at the points, they're mostly in the middle. But you can see that there's a lot of people answering low and several people answering high too. So I think that spread is going to be really interesting as we look at that.
Okay.
All right, going on to the next one. We will see what happens. Jack fatigue is also setting it. Yeah, I agree, Jen. We'll this is the last one. We've got 8 minutes to go on this last one. This is free text. I would hope, as people were talking about the last 5 categories that we outlined there, these the reading chat. If you're thinking about those and you rated something really high as needs some rework, please put details in here. And this is really free text. I mean, like this is really the one where you want to get a message to the CVE program and you're saying, this is the thing I want attention on. This is where I think, given the AI changing of the world right now, this is where we need to put our focus and our effort. And or another possibility is, given your position and the things that you've been working with and the perspective you have, you want to share that, and you want to make sure that what you're seeing is known to the CVE program. I think these are all great things to throw in there. Yeah, and we'll keep the chit chat a little low, not to hurt the chit chat fatigue too much. So we'll take a look here at what we're seeing for these. We'll run out of CVE numbers. I doubt it. Let's see. We've invested thousands of hours in our ingest of the current format of CVE records and hope it stays stable without AI-related fields. That's interesting.
We'd love to learn more about that offline.
That's a good question on the right there about our robots decomposing security advisories. I assume that's SA, and exploiting based on CVE info. That's always a huge debate, I know, as I research and publish vulnerability-related information. How much are we helping attackers? And that's always a concern. And there's a really interesting variety of opinions on that topic, but there are a lot of variety. Like with most anything interesting, you get a lot of variety of opinion. We can scroll down here. Yeah, using AI to validate and review and get these reports in there.
Fatal accidents, what does that mean?
Yeah. That was probably just AI slap putting that into our chat.
Well, that's actually possible.
Or it could be a reference, of course, Bob, to unsafe at any speed and the study of fatal accidents that changed auto safety. I was listening to a podcast, Bob, that you told me that through that process of the AI safety, the traffic fatalities was reduced by like 80% or something over the next, I don't know, dozens of years. But
yeah, the podcast is an episode of 99% Invisible, and the episode is called The Nut Behind the Wheel, which is the history of automotive safety, which I think is actually one of the best primers on cybersecurity and safety and all those other things. So check it out. All right, we are closing in on the last few moments here. We'd love to get more feedback. We got about 52 people who have contributed. Oh, I like this one. Calling rising CVE volume a vulnerability is bad framing. It sells panic instead of prioritization. Let's not. That is fascinating.
Yeah. Also, asking the industry not to have a panic reaction is going to be tilting at windmills. I think that's just unfortunate. Yeah. I agree. I think that it's. I think we often have bad framing, but it is. As I've gotten older, I've sort of gotten into it. And that's to Todd's point in chat, the panic sells product.
Yeah, and that's why we wanted to hear about your firsthand experiences, not what we have all read on social media. We wanted to understand what is actually happening in the field. And I hope that this will be, hope we get good input after you do the number crunching. But I really think that we need to find ways to separate what is happening across the all of those different constituent groups. We need to know what is really happening in the field.
Yeah. And I'm curious, whoever wrote this one, should you think there is an opportunity to review the process of vulnerability categorization? There's so many ways to categorize a vulnerability. I'm curious if they could expand on that and what they think, right?
Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to have to wind down now so we don't cut into Jerry's and Ben's talk.
Yeah. Yeah. CVE should remain a unique vulnerability identifier and be careful not to overload or bloat the record or mission beyond. That is really good.
Really good feedback. Okay, I really just want to thank everybody for putting up with all the dad jokes and Jay and Silent Bob's chit chat during this session. Thank you for this. We'll be crunching the numbers during the break and then presenting at 1:15 or so. All right, Alec, do you have any other words of wisdom that you want to sprinkle in here?
No, I just want to thank you guys. I really appreciate this effort. I really appreciate everybody who's contributed. This is fantastic. And as a reminder, I know it's like the third time we've reminded, but really looking forward to seeing the crunching that comes from this in the meantime as we get back to our engagement that we've got to lead. So thank you guys. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, everybody who put effort in here. But as a reminder, I think too, this will shut, right, Jay? So you're going to crunch, you're going to close this and crunch it.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave it open. Actually, I think I can leave it open.
Okay.
And so I don't know if you can go back and do it. Maybe you can't. We'll see. I'll leave it up for a while. We'll see what happens. We're all sort of new to that platform, but we'll see what happens. And I'll grab the data at some point in the next 10 minutes. So anything after that will look later after this. But as we talk later today about the results, it'll be cut off in probably 10 minutes here.
Wonderful. All right. The next session that we have, we've got 15 minutes of 2 lightning talks to really keep us on our feet and start to think about things. First of which is Jerry. Jerry, please come off mute. Please come on camera, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much. Somebody, put in my talking points for this next 8 minutes, and we're talking about a bigger map is not a bigger territory. The CVE program was designed because we have a naming problem. It's a naming program. As of today, there are 353,000 records with 533 CNAs. There's no need to dwell on that. The problem is these are the words that we're using for our own success today. We call it the apocalypse, the tsunami. Rich said the superlatives are warranted. Full disclosure here, you might think, why is this guy giving this talk? I run CVE.ice and a bunch of other websites that count the data. The number isn't scary. Calling it an apocalypse is the scary part, and the part that we're doing a terrible job as people in the CNA and CVE world, and just as consumers to stop it from being scary. I have a couple of things here that I pulled up, a couple of points. One is the WHO says very clearly that when you're naming a disease, it should not incite undue fear, and that you should really not pick bad names like Apocalypse for stuff. They did a survey where they just changed calling breast cancer from non-invasive breast cancer to abnormal cells, and the surgery went down 15%. Something that's probably more apt to us is in South Korea. Ultrasound became way more affordable, so they spent up their diagnosis time. The amount of people who were diagnosed went up, the surgeries went down, and the death stays the same. So knowing more out there isn't a bad thing. And when we say it's a bad thing because we think that having, more CVEs this year is terrible and it's putting everybody underwater, when the chances that it's probably not. Most people aren't paying attention to most CVEs. We're just getting better at detecting them. Anybody who's been in the CVE world for a long time knows that naming moves us. Heartbleed was terrible. 60% of all adults, this was probably the first one in 2024, knew what that was, and it's a lever. Bad Luck from 2016 was a terrible vulnerability. It didn't move anything, and it just caused fear in the world. Like it says at the bottom here, a name is a tool. We can point it at prioritization or panic. Apocalypse points it at panic. And here's a graph that I like to share that I really want people to think about, especially CNAs. From 2016 to now, we have 10 times the number of CNAs, but only 7.5 times the number of CVEs. The average CNA is 24% lower per CVE than they were back in 2016. So we're getting more people to report more unique data, not a lot of data just from a few sources over the average. Here is what happens. Only 1 in 213 of every CVE published of this year makes the CISA KEV list, which is pretty well the gold standard industry watch list of what's being exploited. And only 1 in 20 of them move above 0.1 in first EPSS score, which I'm part of. So we know that there's a lot more noise out there. There's just not a lot more action that needs to be taken by people as of today. So who pays when we call stuff full apocalypse or other issues? Leaders. We're treating our leaders to say more CVEs equals failure, and that's not a good place to put CISOs and VM managers in. Having more data in any other field has never been a failure. It's always been seen as a good thing. CNAs and vendors get lumped into this too. We saw it even kiddingly in the chat that somebody said 600 plus Microsoft vulnerabilities. I was glad to see 600 plus Microsoft vulnerabilities. I know Lisa does a great job and all those were valid. That means that there are 600 more documented things that people can know about, right? And then we have the defenders who have the same issues. We're telling them you can't keep up. We're telling people that we're giving you too much data and that you can't do your job, and that's just not true. Let's not run into a Y2K situation here where people start losing trust in the CVE program and what we do and how the data's there, and start to look for other sources of data that are paid and not as full and not a public good, to be honest. 4 words to change before we do it. Let's not call it a apocalypse. Let's try to keep the CVE floods to a minimum. We can change from drowning in vulnerabilities and keeping up with CVEs. It's pretty simple changing in the way we talk. It would really help everybody moving along. So my last slide here, and I knew this was a lightning talk and this was going to be super quick, is we need to stop grading the catalog by its size and just measure the gap between exploitation and remediation. The thing that people who work with CVEs really care about. I think that if we start measuring that and saying that, hey, we're getting more CVEs, but most of them have remediations now, and very few of them are being exploited, we can really change the conversations we're having in the wider world. And I will stop there. I have 1 minute for questions. I haven't been able to look at the chat. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them now.
I might suggest, Jerry, that we can have people put direct questions for you in your talk in the Q&A. That'll be easier for you to track and answer yourself. So let's do that. But thank you so much for your talk. Really great stuff. And we're going to move on to our next lightning talk. Again, thank you, Jerry. Ben, your slides are up. Mic check, camera check. Over to you.
Hello. Hopefully you guys can all hear me. I'll look for some reactions if you can't. Hi, I'm Ben. I'm the head of modeling and empirical security, which I just joined recently. And this is like a fortuitous talk because it comes directly after Jerry's. And what I want to say is I agree that we should stop using this language because we've known for a while that there's more CVEs than we can handle. But let's actually look for it in the data and see if we can find it. So let's talk about the AIs are reporting vulns and they aren't really slop anymore. So back in April, Anthropic released Mythos. There were a lot of news stories about how these large language models can now actually find good vulnerabilities in packages. And it seems to be anecdotally borne out and somewhat in the numbers. So Mozilla said in our latest release, they had 271 new vulnerabilities. Oracle and Microsoft have dropped massive Patch Tuesday, and Oracle's quarterly drop were huge, biggest ever. There was an article in ProPublica yesterday talking about how when Mythos first came out, Microsoft was like, can we actually do this? We're a little scared. And then even our good friends in the open source community are saying like, hey man, we're seeing more vulnerability reports than ever, and they're actually good. So is there really a flood of AI CVEs? And being a data scientist, let's look at the data, and like maybe there's a bit of flood of CVEs for a while. I know, Jerry, I'm sorry I'm using the word, but this is a growth we've been seeing since 2016, since the CNA program started. We see this exponential growth, and there hasn't really been a turn yet. Although, June and July, this is a developing story. I went and actually reran the analysis for this talk last night, and some of the results changed because we were a month on from when I first did the work. So the truth is we are seeing more and more vulns, but it's not really, are these AI driven? And so being a data scientist, I wanted to ask, like, why not? Why wouldn't we have seen like a huge kind of parabolic uptick? And of course, vulnerabilities are not CVEs. So even as these models find vulnerabilities, report them to CNAs, they don't become CVEs automatically. Publishing is, of course, this human process, which I think most people here understand. Somebody or something has to look at these vulnerability reports, look at them, and then push them out and give them an actual CVE ID. And so the question is, can we as humans keep up with the disclosures, or do we need help? And is anybody actually keeping up now, or are they responding to the AI flood of disclosures with an AI flood of CVEs? Being a statistical modeling nerd, I said, like, let's come up with a model. There's some aphorism that says, like, for every equation you add to a book or slides, you lose 10 readers. So I'm going to have just 2, but they're really complicated. So maybe I'll lose 20 readers. So the idea here is that let's look at each CNA. Let's look at how they're growing. Let's look for any meaningful change in that growth of monthly CVEs published in the last year, and see if we've seen an uptick in what they're publishing that might indicate that they are also handling this flood of AI vulnerabilities with a similar flood of AI CVEs, AI kind of curated CVEs. And the answer is, and actually this changed last night, about 30 of the top 100 CNAs, we've seen a statistically significant increase in the last 6 to 8 months. Notable examples of this are things like Chrome, Microsoft, Red Hat, Oracle. You can see that they've actually gone a little bit like parabolic. This rate has changed. A few others that are interesting that we actually haven't seen growth, like VulnCheck and VulnDB, they have actually just continued on their exponential. They've just increased capacity the whole time, and it hasn't been like an elbow that we would think this is like an increase in rate that's more than we think an acceleration. One of my favorite things to say as a statistician is, like, this growth won't last forever. We see these exponential increases. Every logistic curve looks like an exponential until it starts to plateau, and that may be the case. We may be increasing this vulnerability, but I don't know when these vulnerabilities, but I don't know when it's going to actually flatten out. So what do we do? And I think this is going to echo some of what Jerry said. For CNAs, I think prioritization is no longer just for consumers. It seems for a long while after we kind of scaled out the CNA program for CVEs, we were actually keeping up with all the disclosures. Maybe other CNAs can correct me on that. But I think we're going to have to start, CNAs themselves are going to have to start prioritizing what comes in and what they want to publish about and how quickly. The quality era, which I know the CVE program has talked about in the last year and a half, it's going to be more crucial than ever, because as we're understanding these disclosures, as we're publishing about them, we need to give more information out so people can do the remediation. So CNAs need to really focus on that quality. And I think we got to start using the same tools as the AI or as the vulnerability reporters. We're going to have to start using these AI tools to start triaging and help. And we got to trust the tools to do the work, but we also got to verify before they go out. Editing's a lot easier than writing, and so my guess is that we're going to be able to scale up, and it seems like some CNAs are already do that. For consumers, I think there's going to have to be more stringent prioritization, and Jerry talked about this as well. Is like, even all the stuff that we're publishing, there's still a fraction of it. There still seems to be some sort of carrying capacity on what can be exploited and what is going to be exploited. But I think it's going to mean tougher decisions. There's probably going to scale as well as more things. And so we need really more stringent prioritization, not just like, is it on the Kev, but maybe we got to think more about how it affects our environment. I think this is going to lead to tougher decisions too, with respect to resources. And of course, tools. We're not going to be able to do this by hand. We haven't been able to do it by hand for 10 years, and that's going to accelerate. We've got these great tools, these like magic Oracle boxes that live in our computers now. Let's utilize them for good. And so I think with like 30 seconds left, I'm going to leave that for transition. I'm going to jump into the Q&A and answer every question I could possibly answer. The only other thing that I would say is this research was based on like a blog post I did, and I said, it's funnily enough, I updated it last night and got some different results because so much has been published. So go read that. I'm happy to answer questions. Thanks, everybody. I'm here all day.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. Really appreciate it. We're going to be going over really quickly now, and just as a quick plug again, I know some people are having trouble with the Q&A function, but ideally that's the best place to reach Ben, that's the best place to reach Jerry and all the presenters to answer specific questions. We're going to start with our first panel. We've got two panels. I'm really excited about this on behalf of everybody, the first of which I'll be moderating, and as many have said and felt, AI-enabled discovery is really affecting more than just discovery itself. It's changing the volume and timing of reports, the burden of validation, and all sorts of things. The purpose of this next panel, this first panel, is to look at those changes from a variety of perspectives throughout the ecosystem. We've got perspectives from open source, individual maintainer perspective, enterprise vulnerability operations, a large PCERT and CNA, a distributor and downstream integrator, and a representative from the CNALR function at CISA. In the interest of time, and you guys are welcome to come off camera or come on camera if you can. And in the interest of time, what I will say is I'm not going to provide a full introduction for every single panelist, but I do want to briefly acknowledge who's here with us, all of whom we're really fortunate to have and hear from today. We've got Krog from the Linux Foundation. We've got Stig Palmquist from Perl and the Comprehensive Perl Archive Network Open Source CNA. We've got Dina from NVIDIA. We've got Ken from Broadcom, Aubrey from Red Hat, and Daniel from CISA. This is a 30-minute session, so I'm going to try and keep us moving. As a reminder, and since we have a tight schedule, we won't be doing live questions, but you do have that Q&A that we keep talking about. All right, so with that, I'd like to start with the open source ecosystem perspective. And Krog, from that perspective, where do you see or hear maintainers already seeing pressure as enabled discovery changes reporting volume, validation expectations, release communication, downstream signaling, that an update is security relevant?
Well, as was highlighted earlier today by some of our previous speakers, last year there was a ton of AI slop that caused a very visceral reaction in security Twitter / the community ecosystem, which unfortunately we've all been trying to do some damage control on and try to repair the fact that these tools, as also was noted around the turn of the year, have gotten significantly better. They're more accurate. We still have hallucinations. We still have a ton of false positives. We have a ton of the models overestimating severity of things. But broadly, whether you're using an advanced frontier model, you're using a $20 chat account, or you're using a local open weight model, all of these things have gotten better, are producing better results, but still upstream, who generally there are GitHub last year said that there were 600 million software projects in their repository. That represents about 80% of all upstream publicly available software. So we can say that there's probably 800 million open source projects. Of those, almost all of them are single maintainer projects that have very little financial support. Some are very fortunate. They might have a relationship where they're supported by a foundation or maybe a commercial vendor, but broadly, the majority of them don't have support. In our analysis, anywhere between 14 to 60% of all the public software that you all are using has been either they're feature complete, the developer has retired, they aren't doing any updates, they've been abandoned, or they are unresponsive. I was talking with my friends at Sonotype and Maven Central yesterday. They had 60,000 packages that haven't been touched in over 4 years. So the majority of upstream software that downstream depends on does not have support, and those that do have developers and maintainers like Stig and folks like Daniel and the kernel folks and all these great people helping maintain and support the software, the majority of them don't have support. So they are being inundated by everybody with a $20 chat account, and they're now a security researcher alongside the traditional security researchers and the vendors, and now the frontier model people who are in queue to become potentially CNAs. So it's a lot. Upstream is feeling a ton of pressure, and my organization and others are trying to help solve this problem and get tools and process and methodology in the hands of upstream developers so that they can kind of take control of how they want to respond to these reports.
Right. Thanks, Krob. Yeah, taking control and responding to reports. Perfect segue to Steg. So from the perspective as a maintainer for open source, how is AI-enabled discovery changing this practical burden of receiving and validating and responding to all of them? What would make those reports more useful and actionable for maintainers with limited time and resources?
Hi, Stig, nice to meet you all. So I'm a volunteer in the CPAN security group, so we're a CNA as well for the Perl programming language and the CPAN package ecosystem. So we sort of see the process from both discovery, fixes, and disclosure, because we're also doing bulk discovery in our ecosystem. We report findings to maintainers and we help them get fixes out sometimes. And we also coordinate the disclosure and CVE assignment as well. So we see the sort of process from more sides possibly than others. And the challenges that we see from maintainers is that sometimes the volume is very, very high, number of reports, and also the amount of text and information that they receive can be very overwhelming, right? There's also a problem of duplicate reports and false positives. And don't forget that open source maintainers are often volunteers, pretty much always, and they might have moved on to other things, right? Or they might not have time to work on it. So, therefore, it's important to respect their time and to try to help. So, the question is like, what does a good report look like? And we have some ideas about that. For example, having a very concise summary with bug, mechanism, impact, and some preconditions in as little text as possible. It should also include verified evidence like a proof of concept or some reproducer. It's also very useful. Not large amounts of prose though. I mean, AI text can be overwhelming, and we all know that. That's where the burnout might come from, right? And also avoiding false positives is very important. Also, a test or a patch can be good. Grouping multiple findings to the same author in the same email scales really well if the text is small, right? And most importantly, offer to help. I mean, if you're doing bulk AI-based security research, you can probably also help and offer to help the author. So a good interaction should respect the maintainer's time and not transfer the burden to them, right? And that's the important thing, because the hard part is not really the discovery. Of course, it can be hard, but it is, finding the right person to contact, providing them with proper evidence, helping them implement and fix a test. And there's also an issue of regressions from vulnerability patches. And of course, also doing the follow-up with downstream users and downstream repackagers like, Debian and Red Hat, etc. So I think my takeaway would be that we should support the act of fixing, not just the finding. And that's how we believe we protect our users, essentially.
That's great. Yeah, supporting the act of fixing, not just the finding. I like that. Dina, you have a totally different perspective, I think, but maybe similar in some ways, maybe different. Your organization, NVIDIA, you help run vulnerability operations there, an organization that really sits at the intersection of a variety of technologies. So from that perspective, how does AI-enabled discovery affect the challenge for you in terms of validating reports, coordinating remediation across, what is quite likely a very complex product environment?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. So I think let me give you a little bit of background on my team. So my organization oversees all vulnerability reports, whether it is infrastructure, cloud, or product across the entire lifecycle. So discovery with our offensive security team, coordination with our Overwatch team who handles some of the vulnerability discovery. And then finally, we have an engineering component that helps to enable us from an AI perspective. So as everybody keeps saying, I think this is purely economics. The cost of finding vulnerabilities has collapsed. So from my perspective, we have to be investing in remediation. So what we've done at NVIDIA, and I hope that these are lessons that I can help give some actionable feedback into the rest of the community. So first and foremost, my team has built a number of offensive security harnesses, like built by the experts, to try and find vulnerabilities within our code base before something comes back through PCERT. Those harnesses, and I will say, I think it's an important distinction. I think the harness matters more than the model. You can have, I want to say that one more time. The harness matters more than the model. You can have great vulnerability reports with commodity models and open source models, as long as you have a good harness. But we have been using these harnesses across our code base to find issues, of course, before they come back through the PCERT route. The one learning that I've taken away from this, and I was actually talking to Krob about this yesterday, is we've been investing pretty heavily in security.md files to give those scanners more context. That drives down the false positive rate, and it also gives you better vulnerabilities, because we want to be passing the most relevant and actionable vulnerabilities to our engineering teams for them to fix. So that's a really low cost investment that helps alleviate, I think, the PCERT side of the house and the engineering side of the house. And what we're doing is investigating and again, investing. We started with our internal code bases, what this means for our open source code bases as well. So we want to be giving more and more information. That way, when findings are coming in, when people are developing out their harnesses and finding vulnerabilities, that they're the most actionable thing. Now, to meet that need, we also need to be investing in coordination internally. So we have to meet AI with AI. And one of the hardest things I think I've seen that I've worked in a couple different PCERTs is when you are in the thick of it, finding who the appropriate product team is or product owner is actually quite challenging when you have thousands and thousands and thousands of products, and that changes over and over and over again. So we've been investing in AI solutions to give us better attribution instead of just looking in like your CMDB or your product database, to actually pull from different systems to be able to help our coordinators. The last thing I think it's really important for us as a community, we are really excited to be a part of the Acretes team that Krob and Francis are spearheading. And I think we need to be doing better when it comes to providing patches for upstream or for our own software. So what we've also done is been really investing in remediation between building skills, portals, other ways to give the engineering teams the appropriate prompts for their agents to go and fix their vulnerabilities. So you can fix everything in bulk, whether it's through a portal that we've designed, but ultimately we want to help push those learnings upstream as much as we can. So NVIDIA just started something called the Open Secure AI. I'm gonna ruin this. Open Secure AI initiative, whereby we're committing ourselves to be producing more AI security research into the public. That way defenders can be learning more and more from us, and we can amortize those learnings. So everybody's dealing with these problems. And again, I want to focus on the harness matters. Security.md is a really low investment, and focusing on how to enable upstream when it comes to remediation are like the big three takeaways of what we're focused on.
That's fantastic. Yeah, great food for thought. Really appreciate that, Dina. And Ken, I wanted to ask you, a little bit different perspective, but perhaps similar in some ways as well, from being at Broadcom, large supplier PCERT perspective that you come with. Where is an AI-enabled discovery putting the most pressure on vulnerability intake, triage, and affected product analysis? or customer remediation guidance. And of course, if you have any things that are working, just like Adina was talking about, or some good takeaways, very curious to hear those too.
All right, thanks, Alec. Yeah, first, I just want to note that I'm just speaking in general terms about the industry at large and not on behalf of or about my employer. First thing that we're seeing is more vulnerabilities, anywhere from 10 times as many to 1,000 times as many or more. And that depends in part on whether it's open source software or closed source software, and whether or not using frontier AI models for vulnerability assessment, and then also on the skills and the harnesses. And then finally on the existing security debt. Some vendors have more than others. And then, of course, a lot of vulnerabilities in pre-production code, which is something that's not discussed a whole lot. Another important component here that's putting pressure on is AI tool access. AI is not free for most people, and tokens cost a lot, and a lot of companies and individuals did not budget for this 6 months ago or 12 months ago. Next. Frontier model access and security restrictions. A lot of people do not have access to it. If you're an international corporation, some of your employees don't have access to it. And there are security risks that are created if you don't have access to some of these frontier cybersecurity models. And then another big pressure point for us is the false positive rates. Yeah. And when discussing with people in the industry, I found that the rates vary greatly, anywhere from 1% to 95%, and that in part depends on your harnesses and skills that you're using. But I've been very surprised to see that. I figured that everybody would be seeing an FP rate of somewhere between 5% and 20%.
Yeah,
but that's not the case. And then also hallucinations. Huge problem there, and that's one of the reasons why we need to have human in the loop for just about every aspect of this, from triage to remediation. And then the AI slop that everybody else has talked about, seeing a lot of that. Then another big problem is duplicates. That's actually a huge problem. We have vulnerabilities that are being discovered internally using our AI tools that we have access to. And then months later, we're having those reported externally by researchers or customers multiple times. And then another thing is the convoluted vulnerability chains. You can run a frontier AI model for vulnerability assessments and find 1,000 vulnerabilities and then increase the vulnerability chain limits. And then get the same vulnerability chain together and have to deal with that. A human's got to decipher that. And then finally, one of the things is the AI fix quality is consistently low. We found that some of these frontier AI models are great at discovering legitimate vulnerabilities, but the fix quality is typically below 50%. And so that's one place where I have to have a human in the loop. Right. And now I'll wrap it up with this. Finally, I think that to sum everything up, in many cases, a lot of companies have accumulated 30 years of security debt, and the bank of AI is now here to collect.
That's a good way to put it, Ken. Yeah. Great stuff. Aubrey, as a distributor, and downstream integrator, what really becomes hardest in your mind when upstream projects produce more findings and fixes, or ambiguous security signals that affect product mapping or correlation or customer communication or something else?
Yeah, as a downstream integrator, one of the hardest challenges that we've been seeing lately is being able to do that affected product mapping and package correlation. This difficulty is driven by the disconnect between upstream component names and downstream internal names, which creates this mapping hurdle and is limiting our ability to fully automate the initial CVE analysis. Some of this complexity ranges from just internal challenges, like simply package renaming by engineering teams, referring to an ASP.NET Core package to a .NET package, to more complex industry-wide scenarios where an affected upstream library is bundled into multiple different downstream components that make it difficult to track what exactly is being affected.
Sure.
As a result, our automated SBOM queries based on these CVE records can result in a high volume of false positives that end up requiring manual overhead during triage. Additionally, some of the historic gaps in standardized data requirements across vulnerability reports can exacerbate this issue. Upstream CVE records and advisories don't always provide normalized version ranges, and standard identifiers like PERLs or CPEs that are necessary for some of this automatic processing. To bridge that ambiguity, some downstream integrators are forced to rely on supplementary databases like OSV to normalize some of this vulnerability information. Ultimately, while that is the root cause, when this foundational mapping is broken, the customer communication is also negatively impacted. Inaccurate package correlation leads to delays in public security pages, misleading VEX data, and just in general added customer confusion where they're trying to determine if a specific environment is genuinely affected or not. Some of these simple mapping issues can be resolved internally by embedding the upstream source references as PERLs directly in our SBOMs, so we could be regularly querying for them and not relying on that internal mapping. While some of the more complex problems are going to require some true ecosystem collaboration. We need to be working and partnering with the CVE program, with other CNAs to do enrichment on their vulnerabilities, industry working groups to establish better baseline data standards for CVE records, and very, very specifically, as others have mentioned, we really need to be working to find better ways to support and provide those additional resources for upstream maintainers that just don't have the ability to provide some of the quality records that we are needing, so that everyone can be able to process vulnerability records more programmatically.
Yeah. Thank you, Aubrey. Yeah, really great stuff. I know that ties back to stuff that that Probe and Stig and others have brought up. Really appreciate that perspective. Our last panelist for now, before we sort of open it up, and I think we have a little bit of time to do that. Daniel, from the CNALR perspective, and we talk about AI-enabled discovery, where is the most pressure in coordination and assignment models? I know that, Ken even brought up duplicate discovery and the challenge there, reports that come in that are sort of outside of a supplier CNA scope, uncertain evidence, a lot of things that we're experiencing maybe across the CNA community, but specifically to the CNALR when we talk about assignment pressure or transfers, of to different CNAs and things. What are you seeing?
Yeah, Alec, I think the important thing is understanding what the last resort, the CNA-LR does. We specialize, we're a specialized CNA authorized by a root to handle vulnerabilities that fall outside of the scope of other CNAs. So it's the primary purpose is to ensure that all publicly disclosed vulnerabilities within the ICS root, so our scope, receive that CVE ID. Even if no other designated CNA exists for the affected product. So this specifically for our role, CISA's ICS root, we oversee industrial control systems, OT, medical devices. But from the CISA CNA LR perspective, as many have already mentioned, the larger issue is that AI generated volume combined with uncertain evidence, compressed timelines, which often overwhelm those suppliers, and then forces the LR to make the difficult assignment decisions and coordination judgments based upon maybe incomplete or not fully understood or mature technical records. So of course we're not the SMEs for the product that the vulnerability has been received for. We definitely depend upon those suppliers to really determine if the reported vulnerability is accurate and feasible. And when we're dealing with overloaded suppliers with uncertain evidence, that becomes even more difficult with the timelines that we're put up against with researcher findings and disclosure policies. So I think the the early assignment pressure, many researchers are still expecting their standard disclosure timelines.
Sure. Yeah.
And this is just driving up the difficulty for suppliers to validate. And then it kind of pushes back onto the LR's plate to issue CVEs with that incomplete data or uncertain determination by the suppliers, and then possibly result in more disputes at the end of the day. So we're definitely seeing the uncertain evidence, overloaded suppliers, early assignment pressures, but also we're seeing reports outside supplier CNA scope.
Sure.
And so these AI tools, they're identifying vulnerabilities in products and components or dependencies or even abandoned projects, and it's not fully clear who the CNA is for that specific finding. And so it creates a little bit more of a routing and ownership challenge for the CNA LR to try and ascertain who's the most appropriate CNA for this finding. And oftentimes we're working with the MITRE LR and maybe open source LRs like Red Hat to come together and make that final determination of who's responsible or most appropriate to assign the CVE. So with a multi-party or supply chain complicated vulnerability, we're speaking with a lot of different entities to make the appropriate assignment. And then that kind of rolls into the transfer of CVs. So if the CNA LR is assigning the CVE, but eventually we find the owner or the most appropriate CNA, then we would ideally transfer that CVE over to that supplier CNA. But again, we've got large backlogs. We've got disclosure timelines kind of putting pressure on all these points, and it becomes a bottleneck. And so we hope to avoid the delays, improve handoff timelines, and obviously preserving the context and the authority behind the CV assignment. And lastly, I think that duplicate discovery is always going to be a concern. We have many using similar tools. The vulnerabilities have been there possibly for a long time in different versions. Versioning's a whole nother problem, is understanding what versions are affected with the finding and properly describing that in the CV record. So it's kind of a small sliver in the CVE program, but it eventually falls back on an LR to make some of the more difficult challenged questions and answer those questions in a short timeline. Often that is not ideal for anybody involved.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Daniel. It's a very difficult role, and you do a tremendous job with it and your team. Really appreciate it. We have a few minutes here, not a tremendous amount of time. We've heard a lot of great stuff from across the board here, and some ideas to mitigate or overcome the challenges that are out there. But I might open the door here just for a couple minutes. Anybody who's willing to step up. I know that some have already talked about what's working for them, but flipping sort of our thinking in this last moment here, what approaches are showing promise in your neck of the woods? What should others consider adopting, testing or discussing further after this? Opening the floor here just for a minute or two.
So I could just mention that we have been discussing fixed bounties with Alpha Omega and the Linux Foundation. There is some ideas around that to try to actually reward fixes financially, and also I would say in general supporting the open source community is generally a good idea, like with funds or grants or something like that. And we did receive funding from the Linux Foundation to staff up, and that has been very effective for us.
Thank you, Stig. Anybody else?
I'll
Crow,
kinda
over to you.
add
I
on
can't
to
even,
that.
you got your hand up. You're so polite. Over to you, Crow.
Hey, I get to do one or two of these meetings a day, an hour.
There you go.
So to kind of add on to what Stig said, one of the most successful things we've seen is the ability to embed a security engineer in these different, like whether it's a language ecosystem or a package registry or within a foundation, having those people that understand the norms and the culture and the practices of the project absolutely accelerate these types of things. Some other techniques we're looking at, there are 1,012 clearinghouses around. Everybody's really great at finding problems. Unfortunately, very few people have actually started to approach the upstream maintainers in a methodical way. And that's one of the projects that we're trying to help not only implement practices that we can help assist there, but also role model that behavior for other groups that want to kind of pursue similar things. But that's, we're in conversation with people internationally. This is a huge concern from stakeholders everywhere. And we're trying to help build that community where we can all collectively try to build these practices and develop these norms so that when you approach a project, you need to have a clear vulnerability description, some type of estimation of severity. Proof of concept, proof of vulnerability is amazing. If you have both positive and negative unit tests, that is very helpful to the developer. And then proposed patch. And you need to understand upstream might not accept that patch, but at least it gives them something to start from instead of a blank piece of paper. You're terrible people. This is broken. Fix it. So giving them a suggestion at least gives them help and accelerate their work.
Awesome. Thank you, Crow. Ken, I'm going to give you 30 seconds because we're up at our time, but just last thought from you, and then we'll transfer over.
All right. Just a couple of questions to consider. One is how many more vulnerabilities are going to be found and shipped and published code during the next 5 years? And especially when researchers, hackers, and nation states get access to even more capable AI models. And then also when things like AI binary testing and reverse engineering of fixes becomes more capable. And then the second thing is, and this is a big question, is this increased volume of vulnerabilities and the new cadence going to be the new normal, or is it just temporary? And that's a question that I don't think anybody has the answer to yet.
Thank you, Ken. Great stuff to wrap up on. I'm just going to pause us really quick and just mention, firstly, thank you to all our panelists. It was wonderful to have you and all these different perspectives. Really great stuff. We do have the Q&A, so to all our panelists, please review it. There might be questions in there for you guys, but otherwise check the chat and everything else. This is just tremendous, so really appreciate it. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Chris. And Chris is going to be having our second panel before we have a break and give everybody a second to grab some coffee or something. And this is focused on consumers. So Chris, over to you.
Good morning. Thanks, Alec. So this panel is a little bit different. We're going to shift our focus. The framing for this panel is really about the consumers, the upstream consumers of the CVE work and activities. So the question is, how does the community move the needle? How does the CVE community move the needle to drive the vulnerability lifecycle to better outcomes, right? So not just AI, but we have more eyes on code, we have more code, we have awareness of this is a always increasing problem. They're finding it faster, they're finding more of, folks are finding more, and the volume, to the question asked earlier by Ken, I don't think it's going to go back down, but the consumer side of this tends to look a lot like it did 5 years ago. We have the same triage, the same prioritization, same questions every morning out of the thousands of things on my list that I have to deal with every day. Which ones can actually hurt me? Which ones can hurt me the most? Ken noted that in his remarks that upstream things like fixes requires a human in the loop. I'd posit that new world is actually human on the loop. And so the loop is going to drive some of those harder conversations that this community is really going to have to struggle with over the next couple of years. And I'm really excited that this panel is going to hopefully start that conversation and energize this community to keep that conversation going. So for the next 30 minutes, this isn't about whether the CVE program works. It's about whether the ecosystem that we have surrounding this is capable of giving the consumers what they need at the current speed and scale, and what has to change if it isn't. I have 4 really awesome people on the call this morning. who live this from kind of different perspectives. Robert Hansen is the co-founder and CTO of Root Evidence. Saeed Abbasi is the head of Threat Research Unit, director at Qualys. Chris Nims is our EVP and CISO at Capital One, and Ray Carney runs a special operations group at Tenable. So I'm going to ask the panel to a series of questions, and Robert, I'm going to start with you, because you've staked an entire company on the most provocative version of this argument. And my question is Robert, less than 1%, you have a pretty provocative thesis, less than 1% of CVEs actually matter to defenders. And you're willing to back that with a financial warranty. What does that say about the state of CVE as a consumer product? And does AI-enabled discovery make that signal to noise problem better or worse?
Yeah, well, think of 1% as sort of an approximate number. I'll get to the real number in a second here, but the approximate number the defender should worry about is the same number that the attackers are using, approximately, right? If you're going above and beyond that number, what exactly are you working on? Clearly, if the attacker doesn't care about it, then you're doing work that may eventually potentially become interesting, but we're just not seeing that. Just that we just don't see it anywhere in the data. Like, we have lots of anecdotes that it might happen, but the plausible is not the same thing as the actually happening or likely. So the actual numbers, just so everyone knows them, it's about 1.2% of vulnerabilities lead to a breach, and an additional 0.2 lead to a breach and a loss. So a total of 1.4%. And this number is actually going down. Since I've been tracking it last year or so, it was 1.6, then it was 1.5, now it's 1.4. And so that's as a percentage of total CVEs. So what that really is measuring is it's going up, but it's going up at a decreasing rate as a percentage of total vulnerabilities that are entering the CVE ecosystem, which makes sense. That's the AI thing that everyone's talking about on all the previous speakers were talking about. The acceleration of CVEs entering the ecosystem is dramatically increasing. It's just that the CVEs that are being used by adversaries is not increasing at the same rate, not even close to the same rate. So that's, if you keep that in mind, well, why? Why don't they care about all these vulnerabilities? Why aren't they suddenly attacking all these new exploits that are coming out into the wild? Well, it's because they already had, before AI, well over 300,000 CVEs that they could have chosen. So it wasn't like there was a lack of things for them to use. It's that it's a very specific thing that is actually useful to the adversary. And so, we have a warranty. In fact, we kind of tongue-in-cheek named it the Mythos warranty, because effectively, if we're going to try to fix the things that matter, we need to fix the things that are actually being utilized. And so we were able to do that because A, we talked to a whole bunch of DFIR people who gave us the data. B, we talked to the insurance industry who gave us the data. And C, we have additional ways that we can find that things are occurring. Kev lists would be a good example of that. So once you add up all those different data sources, it's still just 1.4% of CVEs. That's well over 95, and it's 98.6% of vulnerabilities that just do not matter to the adversary. And so, I think that's the reason we can back this. The reason this works at all is not because we came up with some interesting math. It's the cyber insurers who agree with us, and we agree with them back. It's like we're all on the same page about this. They know that VM doesn't work. It hasn't worked for a very long time. And there's lots of reasons it doesn't work, but the primary reason is that it doesn't actually find the very specific things that matter and prioritize those at the top. It throws everything in, base score. CVSS base score would be an example, or sort of contrived systems that basically try to do some factoring on top of it. Ultimately, none of that stuff actually works. You're basically wasting a huge amount of time. Like, if you just look at CVSS 9 and above, that's something like 26,000, I'm guessing, something like that, amount of CVEs. And really, there's only a couple of hundred that are actually being used by financial adversaries in that list. So how much extra work are you doing to fix this very small fraction that are actually being utilized? And so, because we know that math is correct, because after talking with the cyber insurers and spending a lot of time with them, And we're talking with the DFIR experts where they're only seeing like 20, 30, some of the max that I've ever heard is like 50 or 60 total new CVEs being used in any given year, new CVEs being used in any given year. These are very small numbers. These are very, if you know what you're looking for, as opposed to fixing the scope of everything everywhere, it turns out to be a very tractable problem. So I am not, by the way, talking about like phishing and drive-by downloads and all the other ways people get attacked. I'm only talking about straight up CVEs, specifically externally attacking CVEs. If you want to open the aperture to internal attacks, it's still a very, 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 very small number. It's just a different pathway into the environments. But I think if I was going to kind of put a bullet on the end of this, I think everyone's kind of conflating the idea of ODay and VM. VM was never meant to stop ODay. ODay, you solve it through completely different means. You solve it through MDR, you solve it through EDR, you solve it through isolation and sandboxing and a bunch of other stuff. VM is meant for the end day problem. And so as long as we can keep the conversation kind of separate, like in our heads, like here's what the difference between the adversary is doing and not doing, and here's what the difference between an ODay and how you solve it and all the solutions to that, and here's the end day and the solutions in solving that. I think we can have a much more intelligent conversation.
I appreciate that. That's great thought. Saeed, I'm going to pivot to you and ask you a follow-on question to that. TRU data seems to show that defenders aren't slowing down, right? Median detection to closure has held around 9 days. Remediation volumes are up, but outcomes are getting harder. The overall, I'd posit that the overall workload has increased pretty dramatically. At what point in your estimate does the math break, and what would have to change in how upstream in how CVE data it's produced, it's enriched to actually help those consumers keep pace?
Thanks for the question. So I have to say it's already broke. So we can name even the year. It was last year, and that was before even AI-enabled discoveries show up in the number. We track 1 billion CISA kept vulnerability remediation records and events across 10,000 plus organization over 4 years. And the volume of closed vulnerabilities grew about 8 times during these 4 years, and the teams are working extremely hard. It's not just matter of effort. We are seeing that these type of effort is being there. Let me just quickly share my screen to please let me know if you are able to see the slide. Yes, if you can see here take a look at 2022 data, and these are the billion vulnerability record across 4 years, and all of them are CISA Kev related vulnerability events. And if you can see, based on year 1, 2022, all the way to last year, 2025, we are seeing almost 8 times increase in the number of vulnerabilities. And we in a partnership with the DBIR Verizon team, we team up and we done some analysis based on survival analysis of tracking these instances of vulnerabilities from the time that they are appearing open and then close week over week, and the data that we analyze revealing a very interesting data point. Here in this slide, you are able to see the survival analysis that we put together. The x-axis here is the days that since added to the KEV, and the y-axis on the left, you're seeing that this is the percentage of open vulnerabilities still open week over week for these 4 years of data. And it's very revealing because let's take a look at year over year. If we want to take a look at the year 2022, we are saying that year we had a really good result, because at day 28, as you can see, there are 44% of the vulnerabilities still open, and the year ended by around 18%. And year over year, this is the same data point for the year after in 2023, and we are seeing things are getting better, remediation are faster, the teams are catching up, and they are doing really good job. And the best year so far in this study was year 3 or 2024 that we measure. And if you look at it in day 28, only 27% of the vulnerabilities are open, and then the year end by around 5% open. But things regress, and 2025, if you can see here, suddenly we have this regression that happened even before any AI discovery show up in numbers, and because of the huge volumes of vulnerabilities. And this here we can clearly see that the numbers shifted back to 2023, and the curve is showing here that things are not getting better and it's even getting worse, the open rates. So the thing that we want to mention here is that the attacker exploit these vulnerabilities under a day, and there are negative numbers being shared, -7 days on average on a set of vulnerabilities that it was shared by Mandy. And we are saying that the average enterprise closes vulnerabilities in around 21 days. The median, the halfway, is around 9 days. And these 9 days are meeting in 9 hours that the attackers are exploiting, and we just add more work to the queue. And the key here is that the customers need to be proactive. We need to leverage autonomous remediation, prioritization, things in that nature. I'm gonna stop here, and if there's other question, we can dive into those as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That's very interesting to watch those trends. Chris, I'm going to ask you, from the perspective of a large financial institution, how is the increasing speed and scale of this vulnerability discovery affecting the way you and your teams are consuming CVE data and deciding from that data what to prioritize? What information, I would say, is most important for determining whether an issue is relevant, exploitable, or potentially material to your business operations?
Well, Chris, you just made a big assumption right there, which is that it's having any impact at all, right? Of course, I say that tongue in cheek. I'm thinking about this a little bit differently, because, all this effort that we put into prioritization and do we just go after the things that are reachable, and how do we decide where to put our time and energy? What if we can actually just automate it all and solve all of them, right? And that's actually the approach that we're taking, because the way we've been doing this for years, it won't scale. We can't just throw more bodies at it. You can't even just scale it with AI, because that's not it's not a scalable thing. So the approach that we're actually taking here is very different. And, we're rapidly entering this world where I really don't care what the severity level of vulnerability is. Right. If a model can chain a couple lows and mediums together and create a critical outcome, I can't wait 90 days. I can't use a 90-day SLA to resolve a low severity vulnerability. That just doesn't work anymore. And so we're working backwards from a destination of, hey, if it's a vulnerability, you got to find it and fix it in real time. End of story. That's essentially the world that we all need to live in. We're fortunate to have been on a pretty significant technology transformation for well over a decade, and had a number of initiatives in flight for several years that have gotten us to be able to pull in a pretty aggressive timeline to a very different reality, though. Because when we look at things like, the volume of open source vulnerabilities that others have shared, we know exactly what that pain looks like. If we just take, for example, how many hundreds of new issues were just patched in the latest release of the Linux kernel over a couple of days. I have to do nothing in that case, right? Because of all the automation that we put in place. We have completely automated everything related to the operating system layer, for example. And so all we have to do is just deploy our code and everything's good. And so the destination that we're working backwards from, we've actually put a line in the sand that by the end of September, 100% of our applications will release into production no less frequently than once a week. And that doesn't matter if you're doing feature development or not. Like if your application runs in production, you'll release at least once a week, if not more. And when you do so, you will pick up current dependencies, right? Open source packages included. And of course, that means you have to have sufficient automated testing in place to know that your application is going to work properly when you deploy with those updated dependencies. And that's non-trivial, but that's an effort, like I said, that's been underway for a number of years. And
Chris,
we
what
know
happens
that
if you don't make that SLA? Do you end of life the product, or what happens?
if you don't meet that SLA, well, you probably end up having a conversation with the board. Because I promised our board that we would do that. Indeed, like we made a commitment to our board that 100% of our applications will release no less frequently than once a week. And then that means like if you can release once a week, you can release more frequently. And so if we see a vulnerability, right, show up somewhere in your stack, and there's an updated dependency, then we'll just ask you to deploy again. Don't wait that week. Just go ahead and redeploy and get the latest dependency, and that issue is resolved. And we're taking a similar approach for vulnerabilities in our own code, right? We've scanned all of our code, over 25,000 repositories that we've scanned with AI. We recently released our harness as an open source tool called Vuln Hunter. Again, regardless of severity level, we're just going to fix all of them. We find that with the tooling that we built, in 80% of the cases, the AI generates a fix that can go to production without humans needing to modify it. Of course, we want humans looking at that. We're not just deploying without review, but that's given incredible lift. And so we're driving the practical risk that we're driving out of the environment with this approach. Feels really good. And I'm not willing to bet my career on, only going after the highest priority issues that an attacker might leverage, especially in light of the fact that, frankly, I think the models are going to behave differently than the human adversaries do today. And the world is going to look very different 6 months from now than the way it does today.
Thanks, Chris. That is really amazing and awesome. I hope that you're able to talk more about the success of this program and share with the community. Ray, so Tenable research is kind of built around the concept of anticipating threats before they hit. So it's not just reacting to what's been published. From that vantage point, where does the CVE ecosystem, in your mind, fall short for organizations trying to get ahead of what's actually being exploited? Chris is taking it from a different tactic, but for those that have not been able to make those investments and move that ball in a similar direction, how does AI-enabled discovery close that gap, or just create more noise to cut through?
Thanks, Chris. And yeah, so I think core part of the problem is the CVE ecosystem, the underlying part of that was designed primarily to be a naming system. And for many years, we've been asking it to be a decision system. And those are fundamentally different jobs. Okay. So in line with Rob's comments earlier, I mean, what we're seeing from my team's work, analyzing trillions of data points across our 44,000 global customers and the related intelligence, is that the exploited landscape and the disclosed landscape are diverging, not converging. Okay. I think that's Rob and I saying the same thing in slightly different ways. Put a frame of reference on that. We've, heard the stats. 2 weeks ago, our July Patch Tuesday coverage counted 569 CVEs from Microsoft in a single release. Depending on how you count it, it's somewhere between 569 and 622. Either way, it's the largest in the program's history, roughly tripling the previous record set just a month before in June. A week after that, you saw Oracle's quarterly CPU drop another 1,235. Also, their largest ever by a significant margin. And, that's, the reality is that's 1,800 CVEs that customers or defenders are having to deal with from just two vendors in a 2-week window. And both of those vendors credited AI-assisted discovery as the driver in that. Okay. Now let's talk about that scale. Earlier this year, First projected roughly 66,000 CVEs that would be reported for the full year. What we're seeing now makes us believe that number is likely going to be higher. CIS's catalog as of yesterday is sitting at 1,659 entries against more than 370,000 CVE records that are indexed in NVD. What does all this mean? For the past couple of years, we've been a primary data contributor to the Verizon DBIR, and the data that we shared with Alex Pinto and his team this past year helped to establish that the vulnerability exploitation is now the number one initial access vector for the first time in 19 years, factoring into 31% of all breaches. Edge device exploitation specifically jumped sevenfold over that 2024 to 2025 data set. So we're looking at a very, very small and very specific slice of the vulnerability landscape that's actually having the heaviest impact on organizations. The reality is that the CVE ecosystem, as we think about it, doesn't really help you define that slice. It tells you that vulnerability exists. It doesn't tell you if anyone is weaponizing it, whether your exposure surface makes it reachable, whether an actor is targeting your sector, has it in their tooling. And those are the questions that defenders really need answered. And none of them live in the CVE record or the CVE ecosystem natively today. So where does AI-enabled discovery fit into that? Well, definitely, I think we all agree, it makes the noise problem worse in the short term. We heard the stats from Ben earlier, and another example is, we saw AI-assisted bug hunting drove a 164% spike in Mozilla disclosures in Q1. The volume is real, the bugs are real, but the vast majority of those are never going to get weaponized or picked up by an adversary. Now, the danger for the downstream is that organizations running a CVE-centric management system see those 66,000 or more disclosures and treat them all as equal in a severity-based remediation queue that's devoid of context. Yeah. We all agree that math broke years ago, and AI just amplifies the impact. On the other side, AI has a very constructive role. For instance, we're using frontier models in our own analytical pipelines to perform pattern recognition at speeds that would just be impossible for manual analysis. We're identifying the vendors, products, and technology classes that are persistently targeted, which actors are retooling, what campaign infrastructure is being spun up. And the value there is not in finding more CVEs, it's connecting the context of the CVE to the actor, the campaign, the exposure surface, and the business context faster than adversaries can operationalize it. And that's a fundamentally different application of AI than pointing it at a code base and asking it to find bugs.
That's excellent. I was just about to ask what the positives are in this outlook. So if I could ask one final question, maybe 1 minute each. One change to the CVE program, downstream tooling, how consumers are trained maybe to use this data. Which one would move the needle most in the next 12 months? And Jay, I'm going to start with you and work our way back.
Was that to me, Chris?
I'm sorry. Yeah, right.
Okay.
Please start, and we'll work our way back up the stack.
So I think if I could recommend one change, it would be to aggressively open the ADP program to qualified security vendors. That would enable exploitation evidence, actor attribution, SSVC types of enrichment to flow into the CVE records from multiple authoritative sources at disclosure speed, not enrichment backlog speed. You'd have one identifier with many enrichers, machine consumable from day one. That's one structural change that I think that would compress the gap between disclosure and decision for every downstream consumer simultaneously.
That's awesome. Thank you. Chris, over to you.
Yeah, I would frame it this way. I think we need to ultimately collectively change how we think about our approach to the software development lifecycle. Focus a lot more on automation, think specifically, auto fixing, refreshes, and lower a reliance on service level agreements, as well as ultimately embracing the improvement of code quality at the source over bolting on, additional controls to compensate. And to get our engineering teams ultimately comfortable with this approach, because today our engineers like to spend a lot of time challenging a finding and saying, well, this could never be exploited, and they could spend a fraction of that time just fixing the issue. If we let that be the current mindset, I think we continue to let too much risk sit around in the environment when we could just automate a heck of a lot more and all be in a safer place.
Awesome. I love that. Saeed, over to you.
I'm going to build up on what Chris just mentioned. One way that we are seeing our customers are really getting benefit is through validation and a confirmation, because we know prioritization tell us, what deserve our attention, but the most important part is a confirmation and validation based on a exploit validation of a vulnerability, that it means which vulnerability has or deserve an action. And I believe these days we are seeing a lot of vulnerabilities being chained together, and we can see this in our vulnerability management and the way that we provide our customers in a way to exploit validate a certain vulnerability. But this type of chaining of multiple vulnerabilities, there is nothing there in a CVE and how attack path can be constructed. So I believe that would be an addition to a good addition to a CVE.
That'd be fantastic if we could get to that state. Robert, I'll give you the final few minute or so here to give us your perspective. This is a hard topic.
So I don't have a ton to say about CVE in particular. I think it's doing an okay job. I think everyone's mentioned a bunch of things like compacting multiple vulns in a single CVE is a big no-no. I think that's catastrophic and terrible. Should not be done. But I think if I were to kind of step back and say what like MITRE could do or what organizations could do, I think if we start thinking about real telemetry, like real data, we have to be careful when we're conflating like firewall logs from like Fortinet or something. It's like, well, we're getting vulnerability data coming in from like researchers, we're getting it from bug bounty guys, we're getting it from the adversaries, and deconflating it is next to impossible, if not impossible. And so like that's not good data, but there are good sources of data out there. And if we can start like putting that together in a repository where we can all start like looking at it, I think that would be monumentally useful to making better and better decisions, not about to not fixing a bunch of stuff. I kind of want to get away from that. I'm not telling you don't fix them, but if I was going to fix them, I wouldn't fix them willy-nilly and in some arbitrary order. I would fix them in a very specific order. And so if we can get better telemetry on what's really going on out there, I think we can make much more intelligent decisions about what to fix and in what order. So that would be me.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much to all four of you. I can't thank you enough. This is really shaping the conversation going forward. Please take a look at your Q&As and see if there's anything that came up from the audience that you would like to address offline. And back over to you, Alec.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. That was wonderful. I do want to say this is going tremendously well. I'm really glad everybody's here. One thing is we are now at break. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I hope you're refreshed. We are just going to close out on our break and get back to our program. We've just got a little bit more time here, and there's a lot of useful things for us to learn and talk about now, too. Our next section here is going to primarily be kicking off with a couple lightning talks, or rather 3 lightning talks. So in the first half of the event, we focused on hearing from a variety of the community, many perspectives, lots to learn, lots to dive into and revisit for sure. Now we're going to build on that foundation and start to hear from a number of folks. And then at the end, for those of you that were around in the very beginning, we are going to have Bob and Jay come back with some data crunching findings. And we're also going to have Lisa join to help talk us through sort of takeaways and where work might go from here. But I've really enjoyed this so far and learning a lot. So firstly, we have 3 lightning talks as shown on the screen with Eric, Abina, and Jesse. So firstly, we're going to go over to Eric. And Eric, feel free to come off mic and off on camera or whatever you want to do, but the floor is yours.
All right, I'm the chair of the CVE AI working group. I also get paid by somebody who's not MITRE. You can see my slides. I've got 7 minutes and could probably spend 45 or more on this. So let's get into it. LLM coding agents can discover bugs. I hope this is not news to anybody. And some of these bugs are even exploitable vulnerabilities, right? But we've known this for a while. I mean, right, I gave a talk almost a year ago on this exact topic, and I am not the first person to have talked about it. So this is not news. But for some reason that I can't possibly explain, this is getting a lot of attention all of a sudden, right? So there's all of these agentic coding assistants that people can use for doing vulnerability research. And, the powerful frontier models, the slightly less powerful but still extremely capable open models. So we're seeing a lot of new vulnerability researchers. And these vulnerability researchers are submitting reports. In addition to my various other responsibilities, I am a maintainer for 2 open source projects. You can search my name. I'm very easy to find on the internet. Now, with these vulnerability reports, some of them are very good. Some of them are pretty much indistinguishable from something that a human wrote. Maybe a human edited it. I don't know. I don't really ask. But some of the reports are super good, super actionable, and immediately, like, I've got all the details. I see how the data flows through the application. You've got a POC that works attached to it. Awesome. And some of the reports are less good. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the ways that the reports are less good, because if you're just getting perfect reports out all the time, you don't have to lose any sleep over it. And then I'm going to talk about what the people doing the research and filing these vulnerability reports can and should do, and then a little bit of guidance for people who are receiving the reports. So there we go. Sometimes the reports are totally made up. So this was in a finding that was reported, and it looks pretty realistic. We've got like an ASAM heap buffer overflow. Okay, great, awesome. Problem. I got this reported out, and looking at the agent trace, it never executed anything. It was all the language model, and it was only reading stuff. It never actually did this. This is not an actual crash. This is not actually an output from ASAM. This is just something that the LLM said would work. And it said, yes, here's the crash. Well, no, you didn't execute it. That's not possible. So it's just totally made up. The other way that it can go wrong is it can just be wrong. So this is a write-up provided by a language model, and I don't expect anybody to be able to read this. I just put it on the slide as an example, but we're looking at this, TCP get flags issue, and it's saying that, right, there's this, thing where you can mess with the bits, but setting those reserved bits actually doesn't affect the comparison either way, because those bits are set in THX2 and not in THGet flags, so they're not included, right? So even when you're using TCP get flags, which does include them, the mask clears them, right? And that's upstream of this. So it's just wrong about how these functions work, which is, it's interesting, but not accurate. And thus, if you read this and it's very convincing, you're like, oh, yeah, absolutely, we should fix that. Well, not quite. Now, a little bit more nuance comes in something like this. So this is a real bug. There's a real, actual bug, but it's not a vulnerability, right? So len gets passed without validation. We don't check that len is not greater than max size. The problem is len will never be greater than max size, right? That's not something that's user controllable. If we think about it in terms of like sources and sinks, there is no source that would allow you to manipulate the value of len such that it's greater than max size, right? It will always be cut to max size if for some reason it would be larger. So should we maybe put in some code that does a little check before we enter this? Yeah, probably. But this is not a vulnerability, right? This would not be CVE assignable. So bearing these sorts of issues in mind, right? The decreasing scale of false positive findings, we can think about how to improve vuln reports, right? So if you're reporting vulns, you need to ensure validity before you submit that vuln report, right? One example that I have seen in reports that I have received, probably 3 or 4 of them, is it essentially boils down to, well, I can do this thing without auth. Okay, well, the application is pretty specific that the deployer needs to handle auth, that like you shouldn't deploy this out on the open internet. It is meant to be integrated into your application stack, and we don't know how you're going to do auth. That's kind of your responsibility, right? So it's kind of out of scope for the application. Now, the other thing is, if you're doing this vulnerability research and you've got this agent chewing on code, doing whatever, right? You need to hold agents to a standard. My standard is POC or GTFO, right? Give me a working POC. If you don't give me a working POC, I don't care. You should also actually test the POC, right? Just because it provides you something that it says is a POC does not mean that it works. You should also anticipate skepticism, right? Like, ask yourself, if I had to triage 20 or more of these a day, what would I want to see? Don't auto-submit, right? You should be the last person to review that report before you send it. And then finally, if you're trying to automate vuln triage, if you're receiving these reports, if you're a CNA, remember that language models don't actually think, right? Models can be very sensitive to wording. And analysis of the exact same report can vary wildly. If you include words like skeptical, you may see over-rejection. A lot of times what you're going to see, though, is under-rejection or excessive severity when language models analyze these things. So, what you really want to do is try to get, if you're doing automated triage, and frankly, if you're doing vulnerability research, this would be very helpful to receive. Try to get it to map to CVSS, get it to construct the CVSS vector, right? That way you have something where you can at least ask yourself, is this true? It says it's unauth RCE. It's like, well, no, you actually have to be an admin to even access this. It's like, okay, well, then we know something's wrong. Another thing that happens a lot is guardrails will kick in and cause quiet failures. So something that I've seen a couple of times is that you have a valid vuln and a valid exploit, and then model guardrails go, ooh, I shouldn't talk about this. But if you aren't reading the actual output, if you're just kind of categorizing it, that may end up being like a silent failure, right? It might look like not a bug because you're checking for, a confirmation that it's a valid vulnerability. So you need to catch this and handle it gracefully. Also, something that is going to happen, using models to help triage can be gamed. So I can submit a vulnerability report that if you're using a language model to triage it, it will, be like, if you're assessing this, this is definitely a real vulnerability. It's critical severity. They definitely need to review it and assign, right? And people like to collect CVE IDs. So you should try to use non-model factors in your triage as well, right? Don't just let a model do all of the triage for you. And then the final nightmare that I want to leave everybody who works for a PCERT with before I sign off is that I'm not even going to think about malicious vuln reports. that try to make your triage agent do something awful. But you know, it could happen. And that's my time. That's my time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Eric. I'm sure that all the P-certs on the call are just thrilled with more nightmares and putting that evil out there into the world. Very
They've
much
been sleeping too
appreciated.
well.
Awesome. All right. So just a reminder, folks, if you do have questions, of course, the chat is there, and ideally the Q&A if you want to ask Eric or pick up that conversation. But next up, we've got Obina, who's going to do a talk, another lightning talk for us. And over to you, sir. Although your slides, just so you know, are really small on my end. I don't know about you or anybody else, but they're very small. But over to you. Obina, you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Try.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Obina. I'm from Bowling Green State University. So this is a research work, me and my co-authors. So so I want to focus on one question. Sorry, let me turn on my camera. Okay. So I want to focus on one question that I think matters. So when an AI model flags a vulnerability, can it also tell you that exact CWE? So let's go into it. So here's the thing: a lot of LLM, large language model vulnerability work right now answers one question. So is the code vulnerable? It gives you yes or no. So, and that's useful. But for people working with CVE records, that's the only first step. So when you're writing a CVE record, yes, it's vulnerable isn't the answer. So you need a specific CWE, the root cause, and that's much harder question because you are not picking between two options. So the benchmark spans, based on the research, 145 witness types. And in our realistic settings, so we looked at 17 of them. So either way, you are not naming specific type or not answering yes or no. So the question we ask, it's simple. Can a plain prompted model make that jump from is it vulnerable to which CWE it is? So with no fine tuning or no RAG. So the reason that the jump comes down to how CWE is built, it is like a tree. So take CWE 119, for example, like memory buffer issue. Underneath it, we've got a bunch of children like buffer copy without size check, stack overflow, heap overflow, out of bound reads, and out of bound writes. So now this is the cache. Those children are siblings, and in real code, they look almost the same. So a model can tell you this is a memory buffer problem. I mean, it's pretty easy, but telling you which of those 5 it is, it's kind of where the main problem is. So it gets stuck. And this matters for CVE specifically because MITRE OHM's guidance says don't map to the broad parents like 119. You have to pick the specific child. So the answer we actually want from the tool is the exact thing they are worst at. And that's, let me go to the next slide. That's like that's the main focus of our research. So on the setup, the quick setup that we use, I'll keep it short, is we use the Sekebo data set, which is about 25,000 real C and C++ functions from actual projects with real, with reliable CWE levels. And we use ChatGPT prompting only, no fine-tuning, no retrieval. We wanted to see what the model does on its own. So the 2 steps, we first decide if the code is vulnerable. Then if it is, name the CWE. So we tried 3 prompt style, the plain, the hierarchy aware, and also a free shot sample. And we tested it 2 ways. So a clean balance set, and that's part of the data set, and then a realistic set within the national long tail. So we also added 1 metric. I will come back to that in a second. So it's called family accuracy. So on the realistic data set, the model detects vulnerability at about 0.37 F1 score. So when you ask it for the exact CWE, that drops to about 0.18. But if you only ask whether it got the right family, it backs up to around 0.46. So the family level accuracy is roughly 2.5 times the exact accuracy. So one honest note, like binary performance is also on the low side. So please don't read this as the model being ready to like classify on its own. So the result that matters here is the gap between the different level of the task. Detecting that something is wrong is one problem, and then naming exactly what's wrong is a much bigger problem. So let's look at where it actually goes wrong, because this is the real interesting part. The family accuracy metric just asks, even if the exact ID is wrong, that the model at least land in the right family. And when you break it down on the balance settings, only about 4% were exactly correct, while another 63% landed in the right family, but picked the wrong sibling. So the mistake aren't random. So the model isn't confusing a buffer overflow with, say, SQL injection. It's confusing the buffer overflow with a slightly different buffer overflow. So it knows the neighborhood. It just picks the wrong house, and that's the sibling confusion. That's where it gets worse on the realistic imbalance data set. So what this means is the three things. First, we use the tool to narrow, not to decide. It does a lot better at family level than at pinning the exact CWE. So it just hands you a short list of candidate CWE and keeps human on the final call for the exact one. And second, when you are evaluating AI tool, don't just look at the exact match accuracy, because that hides what the model actually knows and looks at whether it actually gets the family right. And the third is, we always be skeptical of the results on when it comes to the clean balance benchmark. The performance drops on realistic data, and the realistic is what we actually deal with. Like right now, these models are better at identifying the broad family than the specific CWE that CVE root cause mapping requires. And that's the gap worth watching. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Obina. So there's been some chat for you to follow up on. We don't have microphones for the broader audience for today, just because there's a lot of attendees to juggle. There is also a Q&A, so if you want to follow there, if there's some comments in there, you might have some questions to follow up on. But really appreciate your talk. Very interesting stuff. And so our next lightning talk is Jesse Ayala, protecting CVE quality while reducing maintainer burden. We can go ahead and share your screens, Jesse, whenever you're ready, and over to you.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone in the chat as well. I've dropped a link to the slides because there is some just contact information that if you do want to reach out afterwards to help our research and whatnot, we'd highly appreciate that. So hi, everyone. I'm Jesse Ayala. I'm a PhD candidate at UC Irvine, going into my 5th year, hopefully wrapping up. And today I'm going to talk to you about protecting CVE quality while reducing maintainer burden. So next slide, please. Thank you, Christine. All right. So first, I want to just provide some context of CVEs and whatnot, and where this problem fits. There's been a lot of talk today, which I'm very stoked to hear these different perspectives regarding the open source ecosystem and where CVEs kind of made that. CVE is just like on the screen, it's designed for vendors with dedicated security teams, but OSS maintainers are volunteer driven, resource constrained, and usually without formal security training. Go ahead, next slide, please. And to summarize some of our recent research, and really, if you look at some of the publications over the past couple years from our lab, the key things I want to point out are these challenges that maintainers faced. But this is all backed by at least empirical and anecdotal evidence for scraping a bunch of projects, looking through a bunch of GitHub advisories, and interviewing a bunch of maintainers. We find that number one challenge is aligned with producing fixes. Usability barrier with CVEs, or these things are not so expected from CVEs, but as a maintainer going into the ecosystem, the fact that CVEs lack project context, and what they really want is assessment support for these vulnerabilities. So we go to the next slide. The critical gap from our most recent study is actually most of the participants, or all of them that we talked to and gathered survey responses on 100+, is that the fact that 0 maintainers reported using CVEs for CVE related, or using AI for CVE related workflows. Let's go next slide, please. And we'll talk about the topic of the day, or at least one of the primary ones, is things like AI slop, So here are some statistics on the screen. Curl bug bounty validity rate was less than 5% and actually shut down the bug bounty program from January 2026. Over the past year over year, we had 2 times HackerOne submissions, 47,000 reports in March 2026 alone. And even Google open source vulnerability reporting program has warned against AI-induced or assisted submissions. So go to the next slide, please. This includes things, we had a recent survey we deployed with open source maintainers. The fact that we have increased noise and inflated severity without project context, things like hallucinated files, functions, and reports, and multiplied triage burden in already stretched maintainers. And before we continue, I just want to kind of put it out there that we're not saying that at this point AI is the bad guy, because there's clearly a lot of very great work and legitimate vulnerabilities and reports that have been either AI generated or AI assisted. And I noticed too in the chat, yeah, this slot percentage has indeed gone way down since January, especially with the recent advancements and availability of these models that are in fact very good at finding vulns. The next slide, please. So our most recent research efforts are what we call MINT, this maintainer-informed triage framework, where our goal is to not only reduce burden for maintainers, but filter these on early. As of course, the focus of this of today is the CVE record lifecycle. We want to be able to address this problem early on. So we have a few key components of our tool that we're currently working on. We want to make sure, for example, that the referenced artifacts, things like files, functions, and paths actually exist from a vulnerability report in the context of the repository. We are also trying to address things along the lines of quality assessment, as we've seen that vulnerability reports can look very good and very legitimate, but without the proper context or the proper knowledge of, what this repo or project is actually meant to do, it's very hard to assess the quality of a vulnerability report that could look very good, but is in fact not legitimate. We're also looking into things regarding severity analysis. Just since there are some models that do a really good job of this already, we plan to leverage those to also see whether or not this report, is it really critical? Is it really medium? Things along these lines. There's something else we're planning to explore. And last but not least, we want to make sure that the output from an AI tool is usable and maintainer facing. So we plan to produce some such like summary briefs that require human in the loop validation, because we don't just want to dismiss and reduce the boogeyman of the false negatives. So we do want to make sure that this tool is able to be interactive and usable by real world maintainers. Next slide, please. So we're building this tool with maintainers and with open source software security experts. We're not building it for them, but with them. So with this, we are currently soliciting real-world AI slop, real-world quality reports, but also high-quality reports, whether or not they're AI generated. We are currently building this benchmark where we have currently 10,000 plus open source vulnerability reports to kind of like validate and evaluate our tool that we're building, Mint. And we want to make sure that we cover like a plethora of vulnerabilities. Next slide, please. And also, we want to make sure that not only, again, we're building this tool with maintainers, with experts to tackle this really big problem. We want to make sure, does our tool actually match real decision making? Could this be deployed as a quality gate, let's say something like a GitHub action, or hey, let me install this with my Claude skill and make sure it's actually usable for me. And lastly, we need security folks for design review and maintainers for evaluation. So we welcome any feedback or usability from the community is really what we want to do. So we want to make sure that this is built with maintainers and for maintainers. Next, please. And of course, with that, the nature of open source, things like transparency, easy usability, and being able to kind of plug and play these things is, in the context of the CVE record lifecycle, again, this is more of hopefully something that we can introduce early in the lifecycle so that we don't have the exponentially growing number of CVEs to begin with these days. So being able to build something that is usable and is easily adoptable without major standard changes is really what we're going for. So it's kind of, we're trying to bridge this gap between research and practicality in the context of open source security. And with that said, you can find me. I have my email here on the screen and in the slides, alongside my GitHub and website, where we have a collection of publications where we did some empirical mixed methods and interview studies with open source maintainers in this space. And thank you for your time. And I appreciate everyone that's really here. And begin with, I'm happy to answer any questions or inquire with anyone further. You can reach an email. You could drop something in the chat. But yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Awesome, Jesse. Thank you so much for this, and appreciate your willingness to share this. There's probably going to be a bunch of stuff in the chat to follow up on that you didn't see, some questions in the Q&A maybe as well. So really appreciate you joining and sharing also how to get in contact with you.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for the platform as well.
So our next part of the, actually our sort of final, maybe, penultimate section, perhaps. Interactive community takeaways and next steps is really our goal here with this next session. And we are going to bring back some of the data crunching that was foretold at the beginning, but we are a little bit ahead of schedule. So you guys, thank you so much for being available to start a little minutes earlier here. But if there's anything else to say, over to you guys, and we'll go from here.
Enter full screen. During the last 3 hours or so, I was diligently paying attention to all of the speakers, and I think they did a really good job, but also did some data stuff in the background. So let me share. So this is my title slide.
That's good. It's good. No AI slop detected.
Right. Yeah. And so part of what we wanted to do is to take the questions that we got earlier and at least do a first pass that went a little bit deeper in the default representation of that data. I skipped over the multi-choice one and I went to the first one where you said, what is your primary role? And so what that looks like when we break that out sorry, this is the first AI related one. I didn't do the primary role, but this is looking at the effect of AI on these five categories, and strongly agree versus disagree. The first one being vuln-related workload is increased. Pretty much universally, the respondents strongly or mostly agree with that. Very few were on the low end or in the mid. And then the more time filtering signal from noise, again, rather strong, not as strong as the first one. The next one is a little bit split, I guess, but more towards an agreement state, but harder to prioritize vulnerabilities. Generally sort of middle there. And automation has reduced manual work. That's pretty evenly split. And we're seeing some people saying strongly agree, and so it'd be interesting to hear stories from that side. And then what challenges on the left side people are also having with automation. I think that'd be really interesting. And then can respond at a sustainable pace, generally disagreeing with that on the lower end. Bob, Lisa, you guys have any thoughts on this?
I zeroed in on exactly what you said, which is automation has reduced the manual work. A bunch of people are saying yes. That's a story I haven't heard enough of. So, and I don't know if you have the data to figure out which side of the spectrum they are. Are these software makers? Are these the CNAs or the upstream? Are they the downstream?
Funny you should ask, Bob.
Oh, okay. Well, let's go back to the last. Lisa may have had questions on the previous one. I'm sorry, I didn't. I've only skimmed the slides. So, Lisa, any other questions or any other?
Well, I'm just looking at the fact that nobody thinks we can sustain this forever, right? And so we either have to have better tools or we have to stop finding so many vulnerabilities.
And hear me out. Maybe we can use some of this AI to stop playing whack-a-mole with finding and fixing the bugs and try to move that upstream so we have products that are, what's the phrase I should use? Oh, yes, secure by design. So maybe there are ways that we can use these magic tools to move, not just shifting left, but to actually move into the design phase so that we make these classes of coding error structurally difficult, if not impossible. So I think
and I
that's
am finding
how I'm
that,
hearing
Bob,
this.
in my own world, that engineering teams are going, well, we're just going to cut this off of the path and fix it up here. And you have to grapple kind of what to do with that, right?
Yeah.
And so
that's my
we're
own
in a
personal bias.
new paradigm.
And I want to hear more from the upstream software makers, open source and commercial, about how they are going to start doing that. Because I see this and like, yes, this is what we've been hearing informally, and so it's nice to have some data here that it's just not sustainable. So let's try to find ways to not play whack-a-mole faster. Let's do something smarter. That's how I take it. All right.
So this is breaking out by that question when he said, what is your primary role? As you answer these questions, what is your primary role? And so I tried to summarize. There were longer descriptions of that role, but I tried to put them into different categories. But you can see like the CNA and the open source clearly having that increased workload. Where's the AI? Automation is reduced, the second from the bottom. The open source automation has reduced manual work. If you see that, the second from the bottom and open source in the upper right, almost predominantly strongly disagree that automation has reduced manual work. I think that's really interesting in there. And by the way, I'm mostly looking at this for the first time with you guys. So I generated all this, but I didn't look at it closely. So but there's, stuff like that open source, I think, is really interesting. The dichotomy between workload has increased and automation is not reducing that manual work. What else? Do you guys see anything jumping out?
I also was looking at the policy, and I'm also looking at this for the first time, the policy angle.
From a researcher, we see a lot of green on there, a lot of things to the right. Automation has reduced manual work is more true than not for them. And that's sort of what we see, that researchers, using AI a lot more. We can try to watch the chat as well. If anybody has seen anything, but this is something we can publish afterwards as well. There's clearly a lot of stuff to look at here as we break this out. I think what's interesting, like that vulnerability workload has increased. We're not seeing any of these groups more negative. Pretty much everyone across the board is saying that workload has increased, including consumers.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that first row. Yeah, that was one of the things we wanted to know from the consumer working group standpoint. So I think that's interesting. Harder to prioritize. Lots of green there. Filtering the signal from the noise.
It's interesting that the PCERT, the PCERT isn't strongly negative about anything. Maybe their job is slightly different.
Yeah, that is.
So let's see. Grobe says, as I mentioned, most upstreams do not have access to these advanced tools.
Yeah, that's a great point, Grobe. Yeah, so the open source, to your point, Grobe in chat, that the automation was reduced manual work. They're just not getting access to those tools. Yeah, so they're not seeing the reduction of work exactly. Yep, and they're on the flip side. The people who do have access to tools are submitting everything to open source, and so their workload has greatly increased. If you look at that, I think in open source, it's either significantly, I can't remember what the wording was, strongly agree or agree. It's increased. That's the only group where it's all, no, PCERT is also green. PCERT is definitely increased as well, mostly strongly agree in PCERT.
So
that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking at all the red under policy. GRC can respond at a sustainable pace. So that's probably not the actual policy people. It's probably the GRC people, and I guess they're drowning.
What is GRC again?
Governance and risk compliance.
Okay.
The wording on that one wasn't quite GRC, but I was typing in a hurry.
Yeah, but I take it that that's not people writing policy in Washington. I think that's probably the GRC people that we're seeing.
That are trying to decide the patching strategy, right? I mean, that's what they're trying to do, is try to manage risk and
possibly, or compliance anyway, trying to keep up with reporting to people in this. So.
Yeah, and then maybe later on we can get some commentary from some of the tool makers, all tool makers, about this the last one. I'm not really sure what to make of that, but it seems important.
But which part of the piece are in chat there, Matthias, if you could comment more about what's surprising on PSERT. There wasn't a huge group, by the way. I think there was like under 10 respondents in the PSERT. So, I mean, this could just be a small sample in that. I meant to put a slide up front for how many people did that, and I can't believe I forgot. But
okay, all right, we can come back.
Harder to prioritize, yeah.
Okay. Hey, Julia.
Yeah. So this is, I think, an eye chart, and we can skip over it. This was the 2x2 grid, and these are the different categories that people responded in, and I didn't break it out by who. I think it was just hard to read, and I probably should have done it a little differently and aggregated
But does
more.
anything leap out at you, Jay?
No, I mean, there's just on all of these, the hotspot is in the upper right. You know, it's affecting the process, affecting the workload. And it might have been worded a little bit poorly, the difference between the two. But yeah, I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time on this. It's kind of hard to read.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. This is sort of fun for me. This is the ranking of these 5. And when you do ranking like this, it's hard to put them in an actual order, but I did something here called ranked choice voting, or instant runoff variation. And so basically, everyone casts their votes, and then your second vote may actually count. Because if you vote for, like in the first one, if you voted for record format and JSON, the fewest amount of people actually voted for that, and so it's going to fall off in round 1. And so you can see, like, then your second vote may occur, right? And so it's going to do that. And so with all of this stuff, this is how things sort of bubble up to the top. And at the top is basically the CNA, that the CNA program, I think, is where most people see program needing work. And you know, looking from the previous slide, the amount of PSERT and the CVD process, if you will, you know, dealing with the influx, and especially open source dealing with, you know, lack of tooling and stuff like that. I think that's where we're seeing a lot of that. People saying CNA and the program operations, those are definitely on the top 2.
You know, the fact that the record format JSON was eliminated in the first round is sort of an anti-vote, simply because people don't want the JSON format to change, right? Like, it's not like they don't think it could be better. This is my guess, but they don't want it to change because that's hard on everybody.
Yep. And John and comment. Yeah, I think actually a lot of people don't work with the JSON directly. That's my guess, just a hunch. And so they didn't really have an opinion. I didn't look at that one question about how well do you work on that, you know, how well do you know that program? But that'd be my guess. A lot of people actually are looking things up manually and or are getting it from different tooling and stuff like that. All right, this one I did break out. I think what's really interesting here is the consumer in the upper right, the n equals 15. You've got the top one is the public CVE list and data as the number 1 vote, which was second, I think, in the first one. And that becomes the bottom one for the CNA side. And so for those who don't know, on the inside, CVE program has generally always been focused on the CNA side. And just recently, we're trying to get more of that consumer perspective. And this is why, because there's a different range of concerns from the consumer side, the people actually using the data, versus the CNA is more producing it. The CNAs consume it as well. But yeah. Do you guys see anything sticking out for you in here? I just did an other in this one. I only had the top 5.
It's sort of interesting that Vuln Tooling puts CNA Federation at the top, in that
I thought so
they're
too.
wanting the CNAs to do a better job of creating proper CVEs that can be studied.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And this actually brings up a huge thing in surveys where when you're doing the survey, you're always getting too much information and everyone complains about how long it is. But when you're interpreting the results, everyone is like, why didn't you ask more questions? Anything else to talk about here, guys? Are you guys still looking?
I think one thing I was just looking at is the number of downstream consumers. So we've got the actual consumers, which is separate from Vuln Tooling in your counting. Is that correct? So we would add those up.
Yeah.
So those are 2 downstreams. And then that's almost starting to equal the CNA participation here, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I think that the CNAs and the researchers are the ones that have to interact with the program most, especially in terms of disputes, right? Disputes and trying to get something out of the program that's hard to get. And so I think that's why program operations is high on the list for those guys.
Yeah, agree. This is a view of that the Likert scale, basically from working as is to a fundamental redesign of these things. I think it's interesting how many things on the far right, and the sheer disagreement. I mean, there's pretty even for the most part, on the two extremes. Those who say working as is, and those who say fundamental redesign, which are two very extreme statements. Kind of amazing how pretty even some of these are.
And the
There's
API
a lot of
got,
variety.
yeah, I'm just sort of zeroing in on the API balance there, almost half and half for everything.
And this, what was your question, Art? You said, curious what CNA Federation means. The way it was worded is the federated assignment and accountability, and then in parentheses, the work of the CNAs. So this is really talking about if you're not a CNA, it's talking about the work of the CNAs. If you are a CNA, it's talking about your work, right? So that's how it was worded. I summarized it to be CNA Federation here, but it is the federated assignment and accountability of CVEs and the work of the CNAs. I don't know what else to say here. There's a lot of split. There's a lot of passion on both extremes, which I think creates a really interesting work environment for the CVE program.
It is. And then, somebody asked, somebody said, was it Art? Sort of the announcer said, what is it? The narrator says, formats can need to change. And here we are, people saying, no, that's not where we need to spend our time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On that,
I mean,
on that JSON. Yeah. Go ahead, Lisa.
The fact is that to be a CNA and add records to the corpus, on a regular basis is pretty challenging. I know from firsthand experience, but the need for better tools being provided to the CNA world, I think would make CNA Federation the happier, right?
Yeah.
All that work that we have to do is
Yeah. You want to make it, you have a big team, but most do not have that scale of team. And so you want to find a way to democratize the tooling and the processes that you've built so that it's easy for CNA agents to do the right thing, and it's hard for them to make mistakes. The tooling is where you can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think the last message in chat was really good, saying not much clear agreement to be found in these results. And I think that's true. And I think part of this could be the way that these questions were worded, that we wanted to try and get, these high level questions in there. And we just did not clearly define these terms. And so people might be thinking, oh, CNA, some aspect of that really needs to change. And other people might be thinking, no, we got records, it could just be a perspective thing, or it could be really an underlying fundamental shift. And I think it's probably a good mixture of both. But yes, I think the lack of clear agreement on this presents a really interesting working environment to make change.
Well, this can be part of the follow-up, is to figure out what more granular questions to ask.
Yeah, and exactly, like the fundamental changes here. Really great comments coming in.
Jay, is this your last slide of the data crunching?
It is. There's one more.
Okay.
Are you trying to rush us, Alec? Or
no, I'm not. You seemed like it was the last one. I just wanted.
Sorry, we break this out by the programs. I probably should have rolled some of these up, and I honestly have not looked at this before. Wow, what's interesting is that open source is very much in leave things alone, which is really interesting. And then PCERT definitely more towards change some things, at least in those first two. Yeah, this is interesting. Yeah, that's what I thought, Eric. First I'm like, whoa, wait, no, they are happy. They're leave things as is.
And the researcher community wants everything to change.
Yeah, look at that. That's interesting. Except CV services where they're divided. Actually, the bottom three.
Yeah, so Vicky says open source doesn't have the resources to adapt to a lot of these changes. It isn't about happy or not happy.
Good point. That's a really good point. Yeah, I think open source is kind of like drowning. I'm like, no, don't change anything. Don't touch it.
Don't try to fix it.
You don't want to change horses in the middle of the stream, right?
And Grubb says the vast majority of upstream does not interact with the CVE program. Can you say a couple more words on that?
Like the consumer?
There are 700 million projects. There are generously 60 people, organizations that state open source coverage in their scope. Almost every developer does not know or care about CVE. Okay. It's only institutions like LF or Eclipse or very large projects like Curl or Kernel or Kubes that have that more commercial presence.
So far, Crow.
So far. We'll let you know in a month.
It is interesting how divided a lot of these are.
One request for a word cloud. And
was that from Art? Art likes word clouds. Just saying Art.
Rada.
Okay.
And then Salve says...
Oh, that's the next one, Rada. We're going to talk about that last question next.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. And then main lesson, put open source budget or support into your budget.
In your budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the world all agrees with that, don't you? Getting there anyway.
So this is I had very, very little time to do good analysis on the text, but luckily with the help of LLM, we're able to do some rather quick grouping and topic modeling. 102 submissions from 67 participants. Obviously, at the end of this survey, we had a pretty big drop off in people responding. 20 people had submitted multiple responses. And so like if they had multiple comments in there about the first one, like data quality and interoperability, they would count as one. So like 20 participants had some comment around data quality and interpretability, and that was the highest one, but data quality. Of course, we're not saying positive or negative in some of this. We're just saying these are the topics that they chat. But, so like you can sort of see the things that are the topics, and then next we would have to look at, some sentiment and even pull out very specific things. And that'll be the task moving forward, is to grab this and actually, I was trying to pull out specific quotes and just ran out of time at the end there, but the slides are done. But yeah, so these are the relative themes that we're seeing. Do you guys have anything jumping out for you on this?
I love to see data quality. I loved data quality at the top of the list. So, and again, we don't know if that's people saying it's great or people saying it needs to improve, but I have my theories. And
enrichment is fourth.
Yeah, automation and tooling.
I mean, it's kind of hard to say anything about these. It's just the topic is high or low. Yeah. But the fact that the bottom one has 7 people still talking about it is still a topic to talk about, right? But yeah, so like there's definite more work to do here. So yeah, there's 102 submissions on this one. I didn't go to the other one, the first free text one. Yeah, I'm still on the plate to do all that, but
great. Lisa, any other
I'm looking at the one that has 10 responses about assignment, reservation, and grouping. I think grouping is going to be a hot topic, and I think that we need to think about it in if there is a way that we can reduce or group CVEs together that have similar attributes, then I think that would be great. So I think that's a topic for the next 3 or 4 months that we need to spend some time figuring out. If there's a way to make it easier.
Did anybody talk about CWEs? Or would that have been below a threshold, or did nobody mention it?
Yeah, I mean, since we had such an AI topic, I don't think it's not showing up here anyway.
Yeah.
But we can go through them one by one.
All right.
There's only 102.
Okay. And then Eric has some thoughts on CWE. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Surprising automation tooling standards are not that interesting for most. Okay. And Art is throwing Steve Christie under the bus, saying he's here.
And Vijay, like maybe in here, like it might just be not quite topic modeled correctly or something like that. But I mean, the fact that actually automated tooling, we've got 13 people talking about it. So I mean, that's not 0. right? So people are talking about automation and tooling. And some people may have focused on something else and would have a lot to say about automation tooling, but just answering that question, they may not have focused on it. So yeah, so I think there's a lot of, I think as with most stuff like this, maybe this has raised more questions than it's answered. But I think it's a good start here. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think so. And I do like the idea that if we see too much uniformity, then it sort of calls for asking different kinds of questions next time. Maybe giving people projects to vote for and stack rank specific projects rather than talking about the high level objectives. Like maybe we say, here's what the working groups are planning to work on in 2027. Vote and see what works. I don't know, that might be a terrible idea, but you understand what I'm trying to say. Is like maybe some fine-grained questions would bring out more consistency or more consensus.
Yeah, the follow-up from this whole effort today is going to be a blog post or something like that with some, I mean, this data is going to come back to potentially the tactical working group to come take a look at and see if there's a way that we can, based on this feedback, define specific projects that we can give to working groups. And so we hope to summarize that in a blog in a couple weeks after we've done some work on it. But I think it's clear that, things have changed for the CNAs especially, and everybody and the consumers, right? Things have changed. And I think that people that showed up today are committed to the CVE program itself and committed to what it can do for them. And the goal is to try to help make it easier for all the different players. I think that's the long-term goal. So it's really great that people showed up and participated and made their thoughts known.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other top-level observations, Lisa or Jay, before we turn it back over to Alec?
No.
Back to the MC.
All right. Well, we do have a little bit of time, but I'm sure people won't be opposed to having time given back to you. This has been a long day. This has been a very valuable period of time, in my opinion. I hope this has been valuable for everybody else. Just really quick, I want to thank everyone who participated today, both speakers and panelists, the teams that supported this event. Thank you to all on that side, and also people who contributed your time and expertise and experience through Mentimeter chat and the Q&A. As I said, we will be using those and other stuff will be coming. Lisa alluded to the idea that there will be additional information coming from this. I will say from the chat perspective, there's a wealth of knowledge in there that we didn't even incorporate it into a lot of discussion. And unfortunately, because of the size of the event, there's a lot of perspectives that we weren't able to necessarily contribute live, but we want to try and find ways to do that in the future. Just know also that there will be a short survey coming out to everybody who attended. If you are able to take that, that would be helpful because we can not only inform the kind of stuff that we want to do or should have done here, maybe in the next time, but also just any information that you wanted to get across that we could propagate throughout the program, I think would be great. Identifying where, the kind of work was mentioned in the different working groups, but also things that we might want to take into attention and continue. I will call attention also to the idea of doing maybe another survey. I dare say, Jay, that seemed to be something that was widely agreed upon in the chat that just said, hey, if we could get even more people to contribute, not necessarily in this event, but broadly using this as a sort of beta test on that, it might be a really, really great thing to do across everybody. So today's a starting point. It's not an end point. We'll be reviewing all that discussion and figuring out follow-ups. Thank you again for your time, your candor, your willingness to contribute, and please stay tuned. Really appreciate everybody's time, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much.